Hey guys, welcome to Green Bean Fiction. So in today's video we are gonna see what if Jedi Deku was in Star Wars and had Harem, Part 2. Before starting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are interested in MHA fanfictions. This story is The Jedi Hero, Force by Anthony Tyler 9. Now without wasting any more time, let's dive in. After staying within the school for a few days, Izuku and Class 1A are now walking towards the station in time for their internships. They had been very wary about the Sith Lord that had come for Izuku earlier that week and were on the lookout in the skies for anyone who had been coming in from space. Nezu had eventually found the V-shaped ship that Darth Vader had entered orbit with, as well as looked over all the technology within. Needless to say, the school's principal was going to be a very happy animal when he figured out how to speak in the language to activate all the ship's communication systems as well as other things. But enough about the principal, and more about Izuku and his class as they were getting on the trains to head over to where their respective internships will be taking place. You will call all of us if you ever come across someone similar to Darth Vader, correct? Aizawa asked Izuku as the young man nodded. Don't worry Aizawa-sensei, I will be fine. Nobody on the planet is as strong as Darth Vader nor Darth Sidious. If they were, I would be much more worried about the friends and family I had made whilst living here. Izuku said, as Aizawa nodded before walking back towards the school. As he sat on a seat heading for where his internship was located, Izuku kept himself updated with whatever Yoro Musha was doing at the moment. As it had turned out, the hero was doing his very best in order to keep crime where he was located as low as possible with his on-the-clock appearances. It would seem like the hero himself was keeping up face about heroes as a whole as he protected the populace within a far-out city within Japan. Near Dika City. Just in the neighboring city within the district of Miyagi and the city named Iwanuma. Taking the train over there would take a few hours to arrive, so Izuku decided to activate the force within himself and meditate. He was deep in meditation as he felt the force around him, moving around himself and spiraling around those who were near him. He noticed that something small was making their way over near him and sat next to him as he was floating in his seat as his legs were crossed. Sensing the force in the young one, Izuku opened his eyes and stared at the small person. Only to find out that they were a child. The mother walked over and apologized for her child interfering with his meditation as Izuku waved her off. It's fine, I was feeling his power within the force. It's really high just from feeling his presence, Izuku said, as the mother stared at him with a questioning look. I can sense the powers of those through my quirk. It allows me to channel the power I wield through my mind in many ways. I just call my quirk the Force. Izuku lied as the mother sighed in relief. Sorry for being so wary of you, young man. Today just hasn't been a good day for me, the mother said, sitting next to Izuku. What happened? If it's not too much to ask, Izuku questioned as the mother looked at him for a moment. Then, as if feeling like he was someone who could be trusted, she told him everything that was causing her some pain in her mind as well as heart. Getting off the train with the mother and child within the Miyagi prefecture, Izuku knelt to the boy's height as he hid behind his mother's leg. Don't worry, lil guy. I'm totally harmless, Izuku said, pulling out a hand. The boy looked to his mother, who had gotten much calmer since talking with Izuku on the train for the last few hours. Stepping outward and placing his own hand on Izuku's, Izuku closed his eyes and felt out with the force for the boy's power. From what I can feel, you have a great power deep within you. Not as much as my own, but if you keep training your body as well as mind, I am sure that it will awaken within you, Izuku said, standing up and ruffling the boy's head. Thank you for your help, young man. I can't seriously give you anything for your assistance, right? The mother asked, as Izuku shook his head. When I become a hero within the next 3 years, if he has awakened his quirk, bring him to me. I can train him to master the powers that are deep within him, just begging to be released. Izuku said, as the mother gave Izuku her phone number. If it comes out sooner than that, I will hope that you help us immediately. The mother said, as Izuku smiled, I will do what I must. Now, I need to meet with my new mentor. He should be in Iwanuma patrolling at this moment. I hope to see you all later on. May the force be with you both, Izuku said, walking away from the mother and son. As he walked, his mind kept moving back to the child's power within the force. It was becoming stronger and stronger over time. What would Master Yoda do at a time like this? Izuku muttered to himself, before bumping into someone. "Oh, sorry about that, sir," Izuku said, looking up at a massively tall man. He was wearing some old armor around his body as well as had a long beard on his face, showing his long age. He wore some goggles over his eyes as he stared down at Izuku within his samurai armor before he started to chuckle. "Do not worry, young one, I believe that I have found the one I was looking for." "Fate is a fickle thing, no?" the man said, as Izuku finally recognized the voice as well as the hero. "Wait, are you Yoro Musha?" Izuku asked, as the hero chuckled a bit more. "Come, we will need to talk about your training as a swordsman," the hero said, bringing Izuku with him down the road. About another few minutes later, the two found themselves within the agency of Yoro Musha as the hero showed him around the building. "This here is where I do my training on most days, but aside from that, I am basically all alone in this agency," Yoro said, as he sat down on a small bench. "Is there a reason as to why you don't have anyone working for you?" Izuku asked, as the hero stared at him. He stared at Izuku for a moment, before a very calming aura exuded from the boy's body as the hero sat back and let out a sigh. Taking off his mask and goggles, he revealed his black scleras as well as orange-colored eyes. "Have you ever heard the term called quirkless?" Yoro Musha asked, as Izuku thought about it. "It's something about not being born with a quirk, correct?" Izuku asked, as Yoroi nodded his head. "Yes, have you ever heard of the term before being stated?" Yoroi asked, once more. "I remember being told that I was quirkless as a 4-year-old. But after that, I met someone who would become my master," Izuku said, as he had a faraway look on his face. "You were born quirkless?" Yoroi asked, as Izuku nodded. "Well, you aren't alone in that department. I had managed to become the very first quirkless hero. Although during my time, I wasn't part of the minority of 20% of the human race who were quirkless. I was a part of the 50% that had a quirk and didn't. It's nice to have someone who is similar to myself," Yoroi said, as Izuku nodded. "I would have thought that your quirk had centered around your eyes, but I guess they are a mutation?" Izuku asked, as Yoroi nodded. "A mutation from my father. He had black sclera and blue eyes, whilst my mother had a dark red color for her own. But enough about me. What can you tell me about this power you wield?" Yoroi asked, as Izuku informed him about the Force. "The Force is a power that only very specific beings can wield, although I believe you could wield it yourself," Izuku said, as he felt a massive well of power within Yoro Musha. "Well, that is probably because I kept it hidden from everyone around myself. My mother noticed that the power I wield isn't a part of the quirks that we humans are born with and manifest at the age of 4. Compared to that Darth Vader guy, how strong would I be compared to him?" Yoroi asked, as Izuku thought about it. Comparing the hero's power to Darth Vader, he was surprised with how close it was. In actuality, he was surprised with how close to Yoroi's power Izuku himself was. "Your power alone wouldn't have been able to defeat Darth Vader, but you would have been able to come close. Had you had one of these," Izuku said, pulling out his lightsaber. The hero picked up the weapon as he ignited the blade with the red button on the side, and he was amazed with the blazing mix of blue and red within the blade. "Wasn't your blade green when you were in Ua?" Yoroi asked, as Izuku looked away. Pulling out a second one, he showed that it was a green blade as Yoroi had smirked at Izuku underneath his beard. "If you would have me, I would like to show you my style of fighting, young man. Would you be willing to take me on as a master, as your own did for you?" Yoroi asked, as Izuku nodded. "It's been too long since I had a master of my own in terms of the Force. But I might have to teach you about it as well as how to wield it correctly," Izuku said, as Yoroi nodded. Over the week of training with the hero, Izuku had learned how to use all the weapons that the old hero had used in his time as a hero. The fact that the said hero was closing in on the top spots for the hero rankings didn't surprise Izuku. Especially since the man was seemingly becoming stronger over the coming days as he used his Force abilities much more than usual. Not only that, but Izuku was learning how to switch up his styles between the style of Musha and his very own mixture of Ataru and Soresu. The perfect offense and defense was what Izuku was working with as a Jedi Padawan, and having a master again to show him the ropes did help him learn at a much faster rate. He may already be a Jedi Knight, but he wasn't going to back down from a challenge whenever the hero gave him one. The two would be found training with one another in lightsaber combat, as the two would enter clashes many times with Izuku losing because of experience. Yoroi had made sure that Izuku paid closer attention to the paperwork portion of the job of a hero, since he would need to make sure to sign papers for any kind of property damage he did on the job. They were going to be heading out on a patrol that evening when they heard about the attack on Hosu just a few hours beforehand. Yoroi knew that Hosu was within the Shizuoka prefecture on the other side of the country, and that the two wouldn't make it in time to help. But the two also knew that the hero Endeavor was over there searching for the hero killer at the moment. And whilst the two were making their way through Iwanuma, Izuku felt a small shift in the force. Someone close to him had died. Looking back in the direction of Hosu, Izuku felt out through the force for all his friends and close allies within Ua. And all of them could be registered within the force but one. Iida Tenya had disappeared from the realm of the living as a part of the force. And as soon as that was felt, Izuku placed a hand over his heart as he let out a sobbing cough for the person who had become his close friend within Ua. A few minutes before Izuku felt the disturbance within the force, Tenya Iida, descendant from the Iida family, had encountered the villain known as Stain. Stain. You will take the lives of no more heroes. I will defeat you for what you had done to my brother. Iida Tenya called out. Stain stared at the young boy with disgust before pointing his blade at him, and as he went out to speak, Iida had flown towards his opponent with great speed. Only for him to meet the wall as well as a fist making contact with his face, sending him to the ground, and as he got back up, he sent a kick towards his opponent. The kick landed on the hero killer's chest, sending the villain skidding backwards slightly. You're strong, young one, but you are just like the heroes I must purge. Did you forget about the hero who is laying on the ground beside me? Stain questioned as Iida took his eyes off the villain for a second to look at the downed hero. Just run, kid. Don't die foe for me. I can't allow this. The hero said, as he was slowly bleeding out. I don't care for what you did to Native, but I will put a stop to you. Iida called out, as his engines had revved with more power. You will die trying to stop me, brat. What makes you think you can do anything against me, when not even 45 heroes could do anything? Stain asked, condescendingly. I will avenge my brother's defeat by your hands. He was a good hero. Not what you call a fake hero, Iida called out, using his recipro burst. As soon as time slowed down for Iida, Stain had stood ramrod still as Iida flew towards him at speeds rivaling the original Ingenium. But as soon as Iida went for a kick on the man's face, Stain had ducked with such speed that Iida didn't feel what had happened next. A jagged blade had found itself moving through his throat and slicing right through his neck and jugular vein as well as spinal cord. As soon as the boy's body had flopped onto the ground, Stain had caught the head of Iida Tenya as he stared at the boy's shocked face. It always becomes like this, you heroes are all fakes. The only real hero is All Might, Stain said, before dropping the head on the ground. And as soon as the head rolled over to the hero next to Iida, the hero killer crushed it beneath his boot, ending the Ingenium line. It had been a harrowing internships, and the entirety of Class 1A had been waiting for their esteemed class president to arrive to class. Izuku was the only one who was being antsy as well as was looking really sad when he entered the classroom. He hadn't gotten to know Iida personally, but he did learn enough about the young man through his express love for his older brother who he looked up to as if he was some sort of god. And it wasn't much longer than a few minutes when Aizawa had entered the class as he stared at each of the students who had been there. His eyes lingered on Izuku's eyes and facial expressions the longest as he let out a sigh, not of relief, but of sadness. I hate to inform you all, but your classmate Iida Tenya had been killed on his internships with Manuel, Aizawa said, as the entire class let out a gasp of horror. Aizawa would always swear to himself that from this moment forward that he had heard a small sob from Izuku as the young man had tears falling from his eyes. But keeping his eyes on the future, Aizawa spoke up again, gaining the attention of the class to look at him. Just because of the loss of your class president, doesn't mean you can slack off. The job of a hero isn't one that is very safe. You have to be prepared to face death over the course of your 3 years within this school as well as on the field. It is my job to prepare you all for that moment, Aizawa said, as he sat down at his desk and allowed the class to converse with one another before English class had begun. Make sure to know that you all will need to study for the end-of-term exams coming up," he said, before seemingly falling asleep on the floor. He would listen to each of the students talking about their missing classmate, and he wouldn't hear Izuku talking to the girls who he was closest to. "This is going to be a very dangerous time for this class. I can only hope that they can become stronger than this in the future," Aizawa thought to himself as the day passed faster. Izuku was sitting at a table within the cafeteria alone. He wanted to be left to his own devices since he heard about Iida's death. He wasn't really wanting to be around people when he had heard Aizawa speak about how Tenya had gone to Hosu in order to find the hero killer, and was killed for it. He also heard that Pro-Hero Native had been killed there as well, and Shoto had been the one to find both of their bodies. So it was clear as to why the boy was even more quiet than usual, and Izuku shakes his head as he continued to eat his food. He was letting the force move around him in calming waves, letting himself fall into a slight meditative state. He could feel all the midichlorians moving about the school in a soft breeze. He was so absorbed into his meditative state that he never heard Momo, Ochako and Toru sit down at his table as soon as they saw his calmed state. They had been worried ever since they all heard him let out a quiet sob during homeroom, as they had been the closest to hear it. Even Bakugo was worried for Izuku but sent Ochako and Momo to see if he was doing fine, considering the boy wouldn't tell his parents about it. Something about being a man about it and bottling it up, something that Bakugo told them that he shouldn't do. So here the girls were, watching Izuku meditate in silence as he let the breeze of the cool day move past him, causing his hair to wave in the breeze. "Are you all right, Midoriya-san?" Momo's voice called out softly, gaining the boy's attention. "Huh, oh, sorry, I guess I got too into my meditation," Izuku said, as he took a bite of his katsudon. "Don't worry, Izu-kun. We are here to make sure that you're all right," Ochako said, as she lightly punched his arm. "Yeah, Midori, we just wish to know what's going on through that big noggin of yours," Hagakure asked, as Izuku stared at them for a moment. It was a long silence that the girls believed that Izuku would call them out for asking him, but were pleasantly happy when he started to speak. I had a small feeling during my internships with Yoro Musha," Izuku started as he let his rampaging heart slow down a bit. It still caused him a slight heart attack whenever he remembered the moment he felt Iida's presence within the force dissipate. "I was walking on a patrol route of Musha-sensei. When we had taken down a villain, I had noticed a change in the force." Iida's demise, Izuku said, as the girls placed their hands over their mouths. They still forgot many times over that Izuku could feel if one was in danger with the force, much less know when someone had left the force, meaning that they were dead. If he couldn't feel someone within the force, either it was because the person didn't wish to be found, or they had died, and hearing that Izuku had felt Iida's presence within what he called the force fade and fizzle out, made each of the girls believe that Izuku feeling that could have been seen as a traumatic experience. "How are you feeling now that your feeling was confirmed by Aizawa-sensei?" Momo asked, as Izuku looked at her with teary eyes. "It feels as though I could have done something in order to stop his death from happening. I was on the other side of the country, yes, but for some reason I feel as though I could have saved him had I not been a Jedi," Izuku said, as Ochako and the other two just moved from their seats to give him a hug. Izuku's body trembled as he let out even more tears as he spoke to them about how he felt when he noticed most of the Jedi Masters he had known in the past had fizzled out within the Force. He informed them about the massive pain in his chest when that happened, his attuned form of the Force allowing him to feel their individual deaths personally. As the week went on, Class 1A would be seen doing their very best in order to move on from the death of their class president, even going as far as to announce Momo as the class president and Tsuyu Asui as the vice president of the class. Over time the class would move on from their close relationship with Iida Tenya as they focused on themselves. But Izuku for one had kept himself training in the many Jedi fighting forms of combat so that he could become stronger to protect his friends and the girls he was slowly showing love to. Ochako, the girl who he had started to have a slight crush on since she had somewhat saved him from a fall at the entrance exams for the school. Momo, the young woman who had shown him kindness as well as helped him with whatever he couldn't understand and repaid that debt by helping her through her rough time during the sports festival. And Hagakure, the invisible girl who had heard about his past and allowed him to speak about his true feelings on the matter of losing an entire Jedi Order that he grew up within. These three girls were like beacons of hope for him, a sign that nothing too bad will happen so long as they are within his life. He just needs to become strong enough to counter whatever problems the world will throw his way. He was just given the title of Jedi Knight by Master Yoda, Master Windu and Master Kenobi, and he couldn't wait until he became a master with time. He was gaining experience when he asked specific teachers to spar with him so that he could increase his experience when it came to fighting opponents. He wanted to be as strong as possible so that the next person who came up as in danger within his psyche, he would be capable of heading over to them as fast as possible. And over time, the end-of-term exams had soon arrived, and Class 1A were in the cafeteria thinking about what they will be doing for the practical exams. Izuku was by himself for this as he wanted to be sure that he wouldn't be having anyone talking to him whilst he planned for everything. He knew that something was off in the force when it came to their teachers, hearing a classmate from Class 1B state that they would be going up against robots. Izuku felt that something was wrong with that statement, so he mentally prepared for the fact that their class would be going up against the teachers, and considering the fact he fought each teacher except for All Might, he had a feeling about the fact that they'd be up against the teachers. After the USJ as well as the internships, Izuku was for sure that the teachers would send a curveball at them all with this kind of test. Aizawa had already informed them that whoever passed the end-of-terms exams, they would be allowed to go to camp in order to train their quirks and force abilities for Izuku. And those who didn't pass, they would be stuck at UA to forever be in remedial lessons under Aizawa-sensei. Izuku almost wanted to lose on purpose so that he could learn under his homeroom teacher so that he could see how the man would teach. Considering the fact the man just fell asleep whenever given the chance in the class, thereby making it a study period. And here the principal was on Aizawa-sensei's shoulder, and yeah. Izuku's force-sensing abilities were now telling him that there was a disturbance in Te Force. Something that would cause everyone to have an extremely dangerous, but at the same time harrowing time for completing this test. He couldn't help but smirk at the teacher, already figuring it out what they were planning on doing. And as soon as All Might had arrived, it was a given. The students of Class 1A will be going up against the teachers of UA Academy. Class 1A were entering their classroom after they had their week of studying for the end-of-terms exams. Izuku had been incredibly helpful when it came to their classmates' increase of intelligence as he had initially helped them with lessons that didn't break through their brain waves. But after all the study sessions over at Momo's home during the week, the class were prepared for the written test that Aizawa would place out for them all. Izuku, being one of the smartest students in the class, was a clear surprise when he was shown to be the fourth smartest student in the class earlier on in the year. And as the day for the end-of-terms written exams had arrived, all the students were looking over their notes from their study session at Momo's and gained a determined expression as Aizawa handed out the test to each student. As each student started their test, as soon as they received their testing papers, Aizawa had went to the next before moving back to his desk after the final student had their test and went to sleep. And over the next few hours each student would look over their test and attempt to complete it within the time frame they were given before their practical exams would start later on in the day. By the time the class was over, the students were informed by Aizawa to place their hero suits on and head to Gym Beta for their end-of-terms practical. Izuku was the first one to arrive in his updated hero costume consisting of the Jedi Order's color scheme of grays as well as browns with white and blue. He basically wore traditional baggy garb that covered his arms and legs and left everyone wondering what his true physique was underneath the clothing. But it was enough to make them second guess if he was really strong without his usage of the force as he held his lightsaber on his hip. Once the other students had arrived at the training grounds, they were waiting to be set up against some robots when only the teachers were waiting for them. "So you all have finally arrived," Aizawa said, as he stared at each and every student within his class. "We're ready for this final. We know it's against robots." Mina Ishido called out, smirking. "Well, you're only half right," Aizawa said, as the smirk on the girl's face was comedically lowering. "For this final exam, you all will be facing us teachers." Nezu called out, popping up from Aizawa's capture scarf. "I wondered if that was what you were planning on." Izuku muttered to himself, unaware that he mumbled out loud. "So you know about our plans?" Aizawa asked, as Izuku looked confused before nodding. Well, at least one of you came prepared, but at least you aren't going to be capable of using that plasma sword. Aizawa said, as Izuku nodded. He walked over to the teacher and taking his weapon from his hip, and as he steadily reached out to place it inside of his teacher's hand he hesitated. What's wrong this time, Midoriya? Aizawa asked, as Izuku blushed slightly. Well, as a Jedi handing over their weapon to someone else is. Kind of. Placing our soul in your hands. Izuku said, as Aizawa stared at Izuku. Would this also be a form of courting? Aizawa asked, as Izuku blanched. And no, it would only be that way if I were to give it to one of the girls. Izuku squawked. Well then, hand it over. I will make sure that it isn't broken in the office. Aizawa said, as Izuku hesitantly gave it over. As soon as Aizawa gave the weapon over to Nezu, the small creature inspected it as Aizawa continued with what they were planning. After the explanation of what the students were going to do in their final exam's practical portion, Aizawa had set it up where students were teamed up against a teacher each. These were the people going against a certain teacher. Midoriya Izuku, Momo Yaoyorozu vs. Aizawa Shota Eraserhead Fight 3. Shiro Honta, Minoru Mineta vs. Kayama Nimari Midnight Fight 4. Ashido Mina, Kaminari Denki vs. Principal Nezu Chimera Fight 5. Uraraka Ochako, Aoyama Yuga vs. Kuro Sanan 13 Fight 6. Bakugo Katsuki, Todoroki Shoto vs. Yagi Toshinori All Might Fight 10. Asui Suyu, Tokiyami Fumikage vs. Ectoplasm Fight 2. Sato Rikido, Hiroshima Eijiro vs. Ishiyama Ken Smintos Fight 1. Iida Tenya, Ojiro Mashirao vs. Majima Higuri Power Loader Fight 7. Jiro Kyoka, Kota Koji vs. Yamada Hazashi Present Mike Fight 8. Hagakure Toru, Shoji Mezzo vs. Snipe Fight 9. With that all figured out, the first ones on the chopping block are as follows. Aizawa said, listing the names of students who would be going first and last and those in between. And with all that said and done, each of the students waited for their turn after Sato and Kirishima entered the arena against their teacher Smintos. The next fight of students against their teachers would go up as Izuku and Momo decided to strategize for their fight against their homeroom teacher. So what are your plans, Midoriya-kun? I'm sure that our homeroom teacher is very skilled with his hand-to-hand, not to mention the capture scarf. Momo asked, as Izuku sat down and thought about it. He never thought that he'd be going up against his teacher before in a final exams-like test before. So as he mumbled to himself, he never noticed how Momo was blushing slightly as Izuku muttered to himself about potential plans that the two could employ as soon as they were about to start their turn. Unknown to either of them, their classmates watched their interaction. Never knew Momo had a thing for people who mumble to themselves. A random person said. Soon enough it was Izuku and Momo's turn against their teacher, the two having come up with an excellent strategy that they only needed their teacher to fall for. And as the two were seen running on the screens showing where they were located, they didn't go far before being accosted by Aizawa. So this is where you two were. I'd better finish this before you both can decide to defeat me. Aizawa said, in his droned-out voice. And almost as fast as he found them, he was immediately on them as he went into mixed martial arts against Izuku, who had went forward to make sure Momo had the time to use her quirk. As the two went blow for blow, it appeared that Aizawa's massive increase in knowledge as well as experience was winning out in their hand-to-hand that Izuku nimbly jumped back, avoiding a kick. Momo had finally finished the weapon she was making as she threw it over at Aizawa, since she had to focus on the materials and not have it backfire in her face. As soon as Aizawa looked down at his feet, the canister had opened up and he knew what this was now. As he began to cough, Izuku grabbed Momo and ran through the smoke as he pulled her into a nearby building as they prepared for their second encounter with the man. How did you know about the fact tear gas would be a very bad suit for him? Momo asked, as she started to make the supplies for the massive trap for their teacher. I heard that someone with an ocular quirk will do everything in order to keep their ocular quirk active. Meaning, that if we take away something else other than his vision. Izuku said, pausing for dramatic effect and allowing Momo to finish for him. Then he would allow himself to breathe in the tear gas, thereby making him susceptible to more gas traps we have in store. She said, as Izuku nodded. These gas traps though, will probably make him want to sleep for the next few days though. Izuku said, giving her the schematics for pepper spray as well as a few others. Outside, Aizawa had managed to get away from the tear gas as he allowed himself the time to breathe. He had overheard that Izuku and Momo enter a building nearby, so he was looking through each one on their windows in order to get more information. Finding the building the two were in was child's play. It was as if they wanted him to find them as they both stood in the middle of a cleared room on the top floor. Deciding to humor them with their building, he walked through the front door and was moving very quietly and as quickly as possible to get to their location. It was as if watching a ninja move about the building as he finally made it to the staircase and moved up as if he was running from the devil itself. Just as he opened a random door to the second floor, however, a can fell from the top of the door and Aizawa dodged it. Thinking that the two were dumber than they seemed, he never noticed how the canister had opened up and spewing a pink gas that was causing his eyes to water. Back on the upper floors, Izuku and Momo were giggling as they watched their teacher move through each door as tear gas, pepper spray as well as many other canisters of spray that helped cause problems for ocular quirks hit their teacher over and over again. Eventually though, the man finally made it to the rooftop as he glared at the two students of his. So this is what you all had planned. Take out my quirk with pepper spray as well as bear and mace spray in order to take my quirk out. Good job, but you both are lacking in hand-to-hand. Aizawa said, entering a combat stance. The two just stood still as Momo pushed a detonator on her phone as the ground around where Aizawa stood was suddenly revealed to be a massive trapdoor. As soon as the teacher had fallen into the trap, he tried to use his capture scarf to at least bring Izuku with him because he will not suffer this trap alone. But as soon as he felt his capture scarf catch something, he smirked to himself believing he caught Izuku. Only to find it was another of the spray cans of mace. As it sprayed his face once again, he screamed in agony as he fell through the floors, eventually landing on a platform of webbing made from spiders that had spun him up and covered him head to toe except for his mouth and nose to keep him from suffocating. Do you yield, sensei? Izuku asked, standing next to the mummified teacher. Yes, now get me out of here, he called out, as Izuku hummed before using the force to pull his teacher out of the wrapping of webs. Arriving inside the observation room, everyone watched in horror as they stared at their teacher's red eyes as they were glaring at Izuku and Momo. Make sure I don't pin you two on the same team ever again, Aizawa said, as he left the room to take care of his eyes. With that, everyone else watched how the remaining people within the end of term exams had taken their practicals. Although Izuku was wincing from each and every strike All Might made against Todoroki and Bakugo as they were essentially rag-dolled across the entire gym. I'd hate to be them right now, Izuku muttered as his thoughts were shared by everyone else. Izuku was stretching his limbs. He had been thinking about everything that had happened in the final exams for the semester. His win with Yaoyorozu against Aizawa-sensei was really something he wanted to improve over. His fighting skills were better than his teacher's, but he had wanted to have Yaoyorozu have a chance to show her skill as well as mental abilities to the limit. So now here he is standing in the middle of the mall as he pulled out a list of what he needed for himself to grab before the summer training camp. Aizawa had told them about the day before that they all were going there, but the ones who failed in their practical exams were going through remedial hell when the time came. He walked through the mall gathering the amount of camping equipment he would use for the training camp as he came to a stop in the middle of the mall, taking a seat on a bench. He could feel through the force that he was being followed, not like it was bothering him much. He knew the person wanted to talk, so he sat down and with a calm visage he waited for them to sit down. The person who was following him the entire time had finally came by and sat next to him, and once Izuku felt 4 fingers over his neck he tensed slightly before relaxing. You seem to be all alone in this mall, Greenie. How about you and I talk? Something's been on my mind, and I need some help with that, a scratchy voice said, as Izuku looked at the person from the corner of his eye. It was Shigaraki Tamura. What do you need help with, Shigaraki? Izuku asked, pulling a thermos up and drinking some tea. Everyone is talking about Stain. I was the one to attack Hosu, but nobody is even talking about the Nomu I sent to kill him, Shigaraki said, growling a little. Well, the hero killer did kill a hero student as well as a hero themselves, Izuku said, as Shigaraki glowered at him. I wasn't finished. The news talked about how Stain was probably working with me, but he wasn't. I didn't want that kind of individual in my league. He was too erratic. But there is something that I don't understand. Everyone talks about the hero killer and how he kills people. But they don't talk about me. Why? Shigaraki questioned as Izuku thought about his answer. Well, I guess, you don't really have a conviction to get behind that people will understand, Shigaraki-san. Izuku said, as Shigaraki looked at him with an expression telling him to continue. Shigaraki-san, what is your plan for when you finally achieve your destruction of hero society? What will you be doing after that? Izuku asked, as Shigaraki sat there and thought to himself. I would like to just play video games in peace and quiet. My life hasn't been the best because of the fact that I was raised to be a villain, but I really want to destroy the house that started my life. Shigaraki said, as Izuku nodded. Okay, you can just tell people that the society that we live in is too dependent on heroes. Heroes make all the civilians complacent, for when a very evil super-villain were to arrive, the heroes wouldn't be capable of taking them on initially. But another thing they have that can produce that complacency is All Might. He was the symbol of peace for almost 3 decades, that is a long time if you ask me. Personally, I think you should tell the police about your life and have them look into the person who is training you to become a villain. Because in my own opinion, your quirk could be used to save lives, as well as ending them. Izuku said, looking into the red eyes of Shigaraki. I see, so the issue is All Might. Thank you for informing me about this, have fun, little bush. I will see you again soon. Shigaraki said, walking away. Where did he get that All Might was the problem? Izuku muttered. 1. Standing in the front of the mall, Class 1A heard from Izuku about his talk with Shigaraki Tamura. To say they were very concerned about the talk was not really a bad thing. They were more worried and concerned about how he never tried to run away from Shigaraki. Once Izuku informed them that Shigaraki could have taken down at least 3 families worth of people before Izuku could even grab him with the force, they relented. Right now, though, the class were heading onto a bus that would take them to where their training camp was located. Izuku was sitting between Ochako and Tsuyu as the 2 girls were conversing with one another as he looked out the window. He watched as the city skylines were changed with a dense forest next to a large rock cliff. Shaking his head, he was about to fall asleep when he heard Aizawa speak to the entire class as he stood at the front of the bus. All right class, get off. This is our rest stop, he said, exiting the bus. Izuku felt a disturbance in the force. His teacher had lied to them all and he was about to speak out on it. But he was distracted when 2 women appeared with a young boy in front of them all with a shout. Lock on with these sparkling gazes. A brown-haired woman with cat-featured equipment called out. Stingingly cute and cat-like. A blonde-haired woman with the same features called out as well. For some reason Izuku felt a paw image appear in his face as the 2's voices came out into one as their little dance finished up. Wild, wild, pussycats. The 2 called out at the same time in different poses. And a little boy was off to the side wondering what was wrong with life. Aizawa looked at the students from where he stood and spoke to them. These are the pro heroes you will be working with at the summer training camp. Aizawa said, as Izuku stared at the heroes in confusion. We own this whole stretch of land out here, everything you can see. The summer camp you will be staying at is over there at the base of the mountain. The heroine said, as the students called out. That's far. Then why did we stop all the way over here instead? Ochako asked, confused as well as concerned. I'm afraid we both know the answer to that, Kiro. Tsuyu said, as she placed a finger near her mouth. That can't be right, Sato said, looking worried. I'll go back on the bus. Quick, let's go, Shiro said, looking even more concerned. Good idea, let's load up, Kaminari said, looking just as nervous as Shiro did as Mina and Kota did the same. The current time is 9:30 in the morning. If you're fast about it, you might make it there by noon. The heroine said, with an evil smirk on her face. No way, guys, Hiroshima called out, as he looked even worse than usual. Holy crap, Mina called out, looking fearful. Save yourselves. Hiroshima called out as the group started running back to the bus. Kiddies, if you don't make it there by 12:30 you won't get your lunch. The heroine said, as Aizawa looked done with everything. You should have guessed, students, the training camp has already begun. Aizawa said, as Pixie Bob landed in front of the group with a sadistic smirk on her face and activated her quirk to send the group down the mountain. As they all fell, the heroines had called out to them, telling them all about the time limit they all had. You all have about 3 hours to get to the base of the mountain, and your training begins now. The brown-haired heroine called out before leaving. Pulling out his lightsaber, Izuku started to walk away from the group as he let the will of the Force guide him towards the base of the mountain. The rest of his class were right behind him as he walked through the forest before coming up upon a dirt beast. Izuku quickly swung his blade around and destroyed the beast in a single swing, causing Kota to run over to it, wondering how he could kill such an animal. How could you do this? He called out, glaring at Izuku. The young man himself only held a neutral expression as he looked at the creature. Kota, this is a dirt monster. Your quirk wouldn't have been able to control it, Izuku said, as he continued onward. This would be the following 2 hours as Izuku walked forwards, as everyone would defend one another from dirt creatures that appeared from the ground itself. Some had taken the form of concrete as Izuku simply destroyed them with the force before using his blade to slice them to ribbons. With how everything was going, Izuku was the only one who wasn't really tired at all during the start of the trek. About 3 to 4 hours later, the group finally leave the forest as the heroines as well as Aizawa looked over in their direction. Izuku was walking towards them looking as calm as can be before the rest of Class 1A had arrived nearby. Alright, it seems you all had made it. Sorry to say you all didn't make it in the time frame we all gave you. The brown-haired heroine said, giggling. Don't worry, I'm fine with skipping lunch. The others, on the other hand, are not so much. I will be meditating over there, Izuku said, as he started to create a sigil on the ground before sitting down in a meditative pose. Are your students like this, Aizawa? The woman asked, as the man shook his head. Just the one. We've been trying to curb his Jedi tendencies, Aizawa said, with a sigh. I take it this has something to do with that weird, armored individual's battle a few months ago. The woman asked, as Aizawa nodded. All right, kiddies, we will be having you all rest up until later and have your dinner. After that you all will be able to use the hot springs in order to cleanse your bodies of all that sweat as well as other things you collected during your run here. And then by tomorrow morning, we will begin your training in earnest, the woman said, as the little boy with the hat walked over to Izuku's location. The woman allowed it to happen as she turned to the other students. Izuku was in the middle of meditation as he felt the presence of the little boy who was moving closer to him. I could sense you, little guy. If you wanted to sneak up on me you should have erased your presence, Izuku said, as the boy startled. What are you doing? The boy asked, confused. I'm meditating. It allows me to calm my heart after a long day of moving around or fighting. Want to join me? Izuku asked, as the boy stared at him for a moment. Why are you trying to become a hero? He asked, looking at Izuku weirdly. For me, becoming a hero is similar to how I was wanting to become a Jedi Master, Izuku said, looking to the sky with a fond look on his face. What is a Jedi? The boy questioned again, looking even more confused than before. A Jedi is someone who keeps the peace, kind of like the heroes of this planet. But for me, a Jedi is someone who traverses the galaxy in order to protect the innocent, no matter the cost, Izuku said, as the boy growled angrily. Well, heroes and Jedi just go out and fight villains to die, the boy said angrily. Maybe, but what would happen to the innocent people that aren't saved by heroes or Jedi? Izuku asked, as the boy grew quiet. This world needs people like heroes and Jedi in order to keep people safe. Sure, the police can do it as well, but they can't keep up with all the villains of the world. The same could be said about Jedi us. We can't keep up with a villain or an enemy of our own, but that doesn't mean that we don't wish to return home to the ones we love, Izuku said, as the boy let a tear come out of his eye before walking away. Looking in the direction the boy went, Izuku let out a sigh of sadness as he could feel all the pain and mental anguish the boy was suffering from. I just wish someone could help you understand that all the pain you hide can be saved, Izuku muttered before standing up. A flash of a boy with indigo blue hair with a smile appeared in Izuku's mind before he shook his head. It's my fault that I wasn't nearby to help him. Izuku muttered as he walked away back to the class. It was nearing the beginning of the Clone Wars, and Master Yoda was moving throughout Coruscant as he prepared himself for a new student. He had been searching for the one who would become his successor to the title of Grand Master of the Order. He had been living for over 900 years as the current Grand Master. He had been around since the height of the High Republic. And now he was searching for a new Padawan who wouldn't fall to the dark just as his own Padawan in Count Dooku had done. Dooku's fall to the dark side of the Force had troubled him deeply, and with a great sadness, Yoda had decided to head out into the galaxy since the one who would become the Grand Master of the Order wasn't on Coruscant. Climbing into his Jedi starfighter, he started it up as he prepared to head out to the mid-rim of the galaxy to begin his search. Looking to his right, he found Mace Windu walking over to the small aircraft as the glass barrier rose so the two could talk. Master Windu, pleasure to what do I owe? Yoda asked, curiously. Master Yoda, I have come here to inform you that the war between the Separatists and the Republic will begin in a few days. Where are you going? Mace questioned with a raised eyebrow. Search for my successor I must. Feel a disturbance in the Force, I do. Yoda said, as he started up his ship. I wish you good luck in the Force, and may it guide you to your goal as well as successor. Mace said, as Yoda nodded. Return I will. Protect the Chosen One, we must. Yoda said, as the glass window closed around him and he took off. Mace watched as Yoda took off into the known galaxy as he looked to the sky and with his final words spoke. I hope you find what you're looking for, Grand Master. Because if they aren't like what you hope, they might cause our end. Mace said, as he felt the shift in the Force begin on Coruscant. Flying through the galaxy, Yoda looked about the planets that were nearing his ship. They were beautiful in color as they ranged from reds and blues to greens and yellows, but the one he finally stopped at was a green and blue planet. Checking the lifeforms of said planet, he noticed that the populace of the planet was undergoing a multitude of changes. He looked at some of their history through the Force as he knew not to inform anyone about this planet. If they heard about how this planet had people who could wield superpowers that were seemingly fiction, he shook his head as he flew into the planet. Landing in a small island nation as his information told him was named Japan, he looked about the area as he landed in a small forest. Once he was situated, he exited his small craft before using the Force to cover its presence from those who were unsavory. Massive presence in the Force, I feel. Lives here, a chosen one does. Yoda questioned in his thoughts. Planet seems peaceful. Wonder who the heroes are, I do. Yoda thought as well as he moved throughout the streets. Walking through the streets of the small town that his small communicator had told him was called Musudafu, Yoda moved through the streets minding his own business. He felt a massive power within the Force as a man appeared before the old master. Hello there Master Yoda, a familiar voice said, as Yoda looked at him. Qui-Gon Jinn, what are you doing here? Yoda asked, as Qui-Gon smiled. The real Chosen One within the Force lives on this planet. It appears that my thoughts on Anakin Skywalker being the Chosen One were incorrect. Just down this road you will feel his presence in the Force. We are on a planet that is a Force nexus for the light. You must hurry, I sense he is in danger. Qui-Gon said, as Yoda hurried his pace. Yoda continued in his hurry towards the small playground that Qui-Gon had shown him. Looking about the area, Yoda soon found out why Qui-Gon was so worried about the Chosen One. He was being pushed around by some of his peers as he just wished to be left alone, and not one to let a young child be hurt. Yoda acted. Moving towards the children, Yoda announced his presence to the children as they moved away from the child they were beating down. Hello young ones, to what are you doing to him? Yoda asked, his weird dialect confusing some of them. What are you talking about old man? We're showing this useless Deku his place. A blonde-haired boy said, smugly. Showing him his place. That isn't what a hero should do. Yoda said, as he stared at the boy. What are you talking about? Heroes always win. The boy called out angrily and activating his power. Sparklers. Do to me, what are you thinking? Yoda asked, with mock surprise. The boy became much smugger as he launched at the old man before being pushed to the side by the boy who was being beaten up. What the hell Deku? Why did you push me? The boy called out angrily. He's too strong for YUK Kachan. The boy said, as Yoda smiled at the child. The child was small, smaller than the other kids as he had black hair with green highlights in the sunlight. He had freckles on each cheek in the shape of diamonds as he had the most expressive white and emerald eyes Yoda had ever seen in a child. Yoda had thought to himself that sensing the boy's power within the Force, that this was who he was supposed to help train and teach for his future. Name, what is it? Yoda asked the greenette. Me. The boy asked, as Yoda nodded. I'm Midoriya Izuku. The boy introduced himself with a bow. Humble you are. Now who are these? Ruffians, Yoda asked, as Izuku stared at him in shock. Hey, we're not ruffians. Get him, the blonde from before called out, as he and his friends attacked Yoda. And with the grace of someone who wasn't his age, he dodged each attack with many jumps that he shouldn't have been capable of doing. Underestimate me, you should not. Run away, you should. Yoda said, as he revealed his weapon. What makes you think that I will run away from you, old man? ? The blonde called out, causing even larger explosions from his hands. Mr. Alien Guy, please, you need to run. Kachon's sweat is made of nitroglycerin. Yeah, that, and he can spark them to create an explosion. It might hurt you, Izuku said, as he tried to get the old master to move. Worry not, young boy. Strong in the Force I am. Explosion sweat, nothing to handle, Yoda said, as he stood in front of Izuku in a soft combat stance. What happened next was so fast that Izuku couldn't understand until later on in his life growing up. Master Yoda dodges the attack of Kachon as he slides over to the left as Kachon's powerful right hook with an explosive powering it up sent a small shockwave of wind behind the area Yoda once was. Yoda in a quick movement, had then restrained Kachon in the air with the Force before tossing him towards his friends as they all ran away in fear. Kachon glared at Izuku as he ran away as he called the old master a villainous bastard as Yoda chuckled. Funny one he is, alright, are you? Yoda said, looking to Izuku. Wow, that was so cool. How did you do that? What is your quirk? Is it telekinesis? If it is, there are so many things you could do to become a hero. Although you look really old, you could probably defeat even All Might. Izuku muttered as Yoda watched with fascination. Truly wonderful, the mind of a child is. Yoda said, chuckling. Sorry, I didn't mean to annoy you with my muttering. Izuku said, lowering his head. Annoyed I was not. Amused I was, Yoda said, as Izuku thought about Yoda's words. Why, you're not mad? Izuku asked, worriedly. I am not. Sense great power within you, I do. Yoda said, walking closer to Izuku. I'm quirkless though, Izuku said, quietly as Yoda nodded. Powerless within the superpowered world you are. But within the Force you are powerful, Yoda said, as Izuku stared at him in shock. But how do I have that power? I don't know how to activate this power. You called it the Force? Izuku asked, as Yoda smiled. One does not bend the Force to their will, bend yourself to it you must. Yoda said, wisely. Over the next few minutes, the two would work together in teaching Izuku how to wield the Force. With Yoda providing good points on how to have the Force flow through his body and have it activated in the form of telekinesis, it took only about an hour. But with Izuku lifting some nearby trees that were bound to be around a few tons in weight, Yoda was massively impressed. With time, more powerful than Skywalker he could become. Yoda thought to himself as he saw the spirit of Qui-Gon smiled at the boy. The two would walk to Izuku's home as Yoda himself would knock on the door, gaining the attention of whoever was living within it. As the door opened, it showed a young woman who seemingly was slightly gaining weight with her sadness. Who are you, and why are you with my son? The woman asked, as Izuku spoke up. Mommy, look at this, Izuku called out, as he used telekinesis to pull his toy from his bedroom towards his hands. The boy's mother watched this with awe as she looked both happy but at the same time confused as to how Izuku gained a quirk when he was quirkless. That's cool, Izuku, but aren't you quirkless? You shouldn't have a quirk, Izuku's mother said, as Yoda spoke up this time. Quirk, that is the superpowers you are talking about, correct? Yoda asked, as the woman nodded. Apologies, name is Yoda. I am a Grand Master of a group of Jedi in space, Yoda said, as the woman allowed both her son and Yoda inside. I'm sorry as well, my name is Midoriya Inko. Inko said, as she and Yoda sat on a couch. The mother and Grandmaster of the Jedi Order talked for a few hours as Inko asked about this Jedi Order Yoda talked about. And with some time, they had Izuku take a small test that would test his midichlorians that were within his body. And to say that both Yoda and Inko were astonished with the amount Izuku had, Yoda knew immediately that this boy would become his successor. Izuku Midoriya would become the greatest Jedi Grandmaster that the galaxy could ever know about or learn. Smiling at Izuku, Yoda had turned to Inko to give her something that she would want to know about. An opportunity to train her son with his newfound powers within the Force that only he himself could do, since nobody else on this planet could use the Force like him. Inko would allow this to happen after a few hours of thinking, and she also didn't want to be the one to take care of him in the future. She looked at herself angrily when she said that, stating that she was a horrible mother for giving up her son like this, as Yoda sympathetically smiled at her. And he would give her some advice. Sometimes, the greatest treasure we have are those who we are closest to. And sometimes, when that treasure is being taken, we feel their disappearance more than most. Train him I must, protect himself he should know, Yoda said, placing a three-clawed hand on her knee. Thank you Yoda-san, please make sure to protect my son to the best of your ability. Inko said, as Izuku sat next to his mother. I'm sorry that I have to leave mommy. I promise that I will come back one day to see you again. Izuku said, as he hugged his mother. Inko hugged Izuku as well as Yoda would learn firsthand that Izuku and his mother were very emotional people. And as Yoda watched the two's interaction, he had a small glimpse into the future of which had Izuku as the Grandmaster of the Order. It showed Izuku allowing others to have something or someone to love, but teaching them to not allow their kidnapping, assassination, or many other things blind them to the horrors that they will commit in their name. Right here and now, Yoda smiled even more as he decided to teach Izuku in a separate way to the rest of his order. Izuku will be allowed to show his feelings about others as well as his fellow Jedi. He will be allowed to experience love but only in a controlled setting. This will be a long few years to train Izuku, and Yoda can't wait to see what Izuku will become as soon as he becomes consumed by the Force. Izuku sat in the middle of a clear field as he lifted around 10 boulders that weighed around 5 tons each. He had been set to this limit in order to strain the amount of Force sensing he can use to tell others where opponents are hiding. He was told to keep each and every boulder up in the air as he spread his senses around the training field and inform Aizawa about where his classmates were located and what they were doing. Whilst the rest of his class were doing their specific training to power up their quirks, Izuku kept calm as he strained his power to the limit in order to sense his allies as well as enemies who could be a threat. He would continue to do this as he sat on the ground floating in the air as well whilst Aizawa moved throughout each training zone. Aizawa had stayed near Izuku to hear what Izuku spoke about his friends as well as classmates and what they were doing. Nodding, Aizawa allowed Izuku to continue without informing him about their locations as well as trying to do some shadow fighting with his weapon. Touching down on the ground, he kept the boulders in the air as he strained his force abilities to the max as he went through the motions of using his lightsaber combat of Shiresu. A mixture of Sorazu and Shicho. As time passed, the students had one after the other reached the maximum they could handle with their quirks whilst taking breaks before Aizawa called off their training. The only one who didn't stop training was Izuku. He had been spreading his influence within the Force as far as possible without a single break. He had a very high endurance in order to do this considering the fact that he was missing out on dinner at the moment. Fortunately for the villains, they had arrived outside Izuku's range of sensing as they looked down at the forest below as the students trained to their heart's content. I found the training grounds, what are we supposed to do? A villain asked, as another looked to the man who spoke. Well, how about we wait until Shigaraki tells us our mission? We don't know who we are after, once that is given to us a plan will be made. The villain said, as their bodies were covered in shadows. Izuku was now eating dinner as he watched his classmates take part in the Path of Courage. He was snickering at how the others entered and returned from the forest with fear-ridden gazes as they had been scared half to death during the run. Izuku's turn was here, but he decided to not go on the path but go further out to find Kota. The young boy hadn't eaten anything that night and he wanted to be sure that he got some food in him. So as he walked down the path to the boy's secret hiding spot, he smelled the air as he felt a disturbance in the force. Running down the path, he finally made it at the hiding place where he found Kota sitting down overlooking the entire forest. "Kota, you need to leave the area now," Izuku called out, running to the boy. "What the hell are you talking about?" he asked, not even concerned in the slightest. "I think you should have listened to him, brat, he just might had saved your life," another voice said, as it revealed a man covered in a cloak. "Who are you?" Izuku called out, pulling the now fearful Kota behind himself. "I guess you don't know me, I'm surprised that you hadn't heard of my exploits. The name's Muscular, and I can't wait to see you bleed," the villain called out, tossing his cloak away. The man stood at around 6 feet 5 without his quirk active, but with it activating. Izuku could easily tell that the man was nearing All Might's height in terms of mountains of muscle. Izuku used the force to quite easily pick up the villain and toss him off in the distance, knowing it would take him a bit to return back to where the two were located at. This would buy the two of them enough time to get Kota back to Mandalay as well as inform his class about the villains attacking the forest. Picking the boy up, he ran off into the brush nearby as he sensed out where the teachers as well as Mandalay was located. During this time, Izuku had been sensing and getting to know the energies of the pussycats, and there was one noticeable difference in each one of them. Shiratoko was missing. Ragdoll had disappeared from the camp and Izuku couldn't sense where she was located, and he was getting more and more worried as time went further on. Within the next few minutes, Izuku soon found himself standing in front of Mandalay as the woman was screaming out for Kota's name. "Kota," she called out, looking in all directions. "Mandalay, over here," Izuku called out, as the woman turned around to find the two staring at her. "There you both are. I heard that something bad happened in the forest. You both need to get into the cottage and stay there," Mandalay said, as Izuku shook his head. "I need to inform the others that the villains are here," Izuku said, as Mandalay just sighed. "Just because you've been in a war, doesn't mean that you should have been on the field back then. Make sure to keep all of yourselves safe. I am giving you all express permission to use your quirks freely to defend yourselves from threats," Mandalay said, as Izuku nodded, returning back to the forest. Aizawa had also arrived on the scene and told her to spread that knowledge throughout the students so they could properly fight back. Running through the forest, Izuku soon found himself face to chest with Muscular as he had appeared out of nowhere. Throwing a punch towards the young man, which was evaded easily, as if the man was throwing his punch in slow motion. Izuku then twirled in the air and sent a very fast and powerful kick to the man's cheek, sending him flying through multiple trees. Izuku used the full abilities that he held within the force as he pulled rocks, metals, dirt, trees, and other objects into his view as he held Muscular within the enhanced prison of ground. Leaving Muscular there again, Izuku ran off in order to find the rest of the class, but not before Muscular told him about their targets. "I would be aware of your situation, brat. As soon as I get out of this, you are going to be brought back to the boss in order to see what they can do about you. Even that ash blonde brat as well," Muscular screamed out, as he punched away at his prison. On the other side of the forest, Bakugo and Todoroki were teaming up in order to take down another villain as they used their quirk to keep them both away from him. The two were having a very hard time with the villain as they kept mumbling about meat and wanting to eat it, before throwing his regenerating teeth at them over and over again. The two growled at how they were being forced on the backburner again and again, before Izuku came flying through the area as he used the force to choke the villain and throw him out of the forest and back on top of the nearby plateau. Looking at Izuku, they found him covered in scratches and scuff marks on his body as he breathed heavily. "Finally found you," Izuku said, as he gained a happy glint in his eyes. "The fuck are you doing here, Deku?" Bakugo called out, as he ran over. "Just looking for our classmates, me and you are their targets, Katsuki," Izuku said, as Shoto immediately started to look in the forest. "We should probably leave, we don't know if we are going to be alone for very long. The forest is in utter chaos at the moment," Shoto muttered, as Izuku led the two away from the forest and back to where he had found Mandalay earlier. "I could have sworn that Pink Cheeks was over this way with frog lips," Bakugo said, as he was moving in front of both boys. "Yeah, I told them to run over to the cottage back the way I came from. Don't know if they made it though," Izuku said, as the trio moved on and soon became a squad. Mainly because of the fact that Shoji and Tokiyami had arrived at the area as they had finished taking down a Nomu that had saw blades for arms and managed to put it down for good. Yaoyorozu and Jiro were next as the two were with one another as they held off multiple opponents who, once defeated, turned into weird sludge that was brown in color. After them it was Kendo and Tetsu as they had managed to knock out a certain villain who was making some kind of smog in the forest. By the time the class had arrived at the cottage, they were attacked by the entire group of villains as they fought their best to keep them all away. Izuku was pulled away from the group by Muscular as the man had landed in the middle of the group, catching All by surprise and punching Izuku in the gut, sending him above the forest a few hundred meters away. With him all alone now, he was dodging strikes from Muscular as the man threw his attacks with reckless abandon. Sensing a change in his fighting style, Izuku started to use his own martial arts moves as he landed blows to the man's temple, elbows, thighs, as well as wrists, causing the man to lose feeling in each of them. By the time Izuku had Muscular on his knees, he had sent a harsh kick to the man's temple, knocking him out as he bled from his nose and mouth from having lost a few teeth and biting his own cheek. Running back to the group, Izuku soon found that they all had been rushing towards a certain man who had looked like he'd seen better days. Staples all over his body, face, arms, legs that could be seen, and he threw blue flames at the group before holding onto the person they came after. Bakugo. It appeared that in the chaos that the group had been a part of, Bakugo had been taken whilst they were distracted. And the villains had kidnapped him as soon as the portal had disappeared. In the end, the summer training camp had been put to an end as multiple teachers, heroes as well as students were injured in this attack. And sadly, one of them had suffered such injuries that they had died on the ground, and their name was. Izuku was looking around the summer camp trying to get Bakugo's face of fear and slight worry for him out of his mind. He wasn't paying any attention to where he was going when he tripped over someone or something unconscious or dead. Looking down, he found Ashido laying on the ground not moving. Thinking that she was going to do a prank on everyone, he felt out for her force energy. Only to receive no notice of it still there. Izuku's mind was racing. Was she dead? Was she just faking her death? What in the world was happening? But as Izuku kneeled next to her side, he pulled her body to where he could see her front as well as face, only to be stricken with horror. There was a hole in the middle of her chest, blood still seeping through it as he tried to use the force to heal her wound and at least try and fix the damage. Feeling out for her force energy, he found that there was nothing left before he pulled up a phone and called Aizawa. He couldn't understand how Ashido could have been killed, but as tears fell from his eyes the teacher answered his call. Midoriya, what's wrong? Aizawa asked, as Izuku sobbed a little. Aizawa-sensei. I found Ashido-san. Izuku said, stuttering. Where are you? Aizawa said, urgently. Down the path for the path of courage. Izuku said, softly as he prepared to hang up. Ignite your lightsaber if you feel my presence so I can make it to your position. Aizawa said, hanging up. Once that was over, Izuku waited until he felt Aizawa near his location and ignited his lightsaber with the force. Once the man saw the green glow from inside the forest, he made his way over to Izuku as fast as he could. As soon as the man arrived though, he soon let out a small gasp as he saw Izuku sobbing over the corpse of a classmate. He ran over and looked her over. Seeing signs of healing on her body, he looked to Izuku as the boy shook his head and cried even more. The man covered Ashido's body with his capture scarf and pulled Izuku away from the area, knowing that he wouldn't wish to be seen for a moment. When the news got their hands on the information from Ua about how a student had both been killed and kidnapped, they were furious. They were attacking the school with everything they had and were demanding answers as to how this could happen not only once in the new year, but twice. The teachers had their hands full as they were doing their best in order to bring the fury of the press down as much as possible. As for Izuku and Class 1A, they were thinking about everything that had happened up until now and they were fearful of who would be next within their class. Izuku though, had been thinking of a plan to get Katsuki out of the hands of the villains and bring him back home to his mother and father. They had been fearful of what had happened at the camp and were demanding that the heroes save their son. Izuku slipped out during the evening as he thought about how to save Bakugo from the villains. He had run into Kirishima as they arrived at the hospital. Hey, Kirishima, Izuku said, with a sad look on his face. Hey Midoriya, can I ask you a question since you're here? Kirishima asked, as Izuku chuckled. You already did, but what is it? Izuku asked, as Kirishima chuckled as well before gaining a serious expression. Do you know how Ishido was killed? From what the teachers are telling me, she was all alone in the forest, and the simple fact that the hole in her chest is really large. It was probably a Nomu. Kirishima asked, as tears fell out of his eyes. I don't know how she was killed. All I know was that when I found her, she was already long dead. I think she was dead since the fight started. She was probably caught off guard. Izuku said, sadly, as Kirishima sobbed even more. She wouldn't want me to be sad. I loved her like she was my little sister. She was the yin to my yang, and I don't know how I will be able to live on without her. Kirishima said, as Izuku pulled him into a hug. We don't know about how Ishido died, but what we can do is make sure that nobody dies the same way like she did. We must make sure to be the heroes she wanted us to be. Izuku said, as Kirishima let out a small smile. She would, wouldn't she? Kirishima rhetorically asked. They stayed quiet for a long time, before they regained their determination and walked through the hospital doors in order to visit Yaoyorozu. They were going to save Bakugo, with or without her. Walking up to the receptionist, Izuku stood in front of her as she looked at both of them with concern. Is there anything I can do for you both? The receptionist questioned. Yeah, we're here to see Yaoyorozu Momo. She is our classmate from UA. Midoriya Izuku and Kirishima Eijiro. Izuku said, as the receptionist nodded. She is in room 145 down the hall. The heroes are speaking to her at the moment, so you will have to wait outside the door. The receptionist said, as Izuku thanked her. The two boys walked towards the door where the heroes were just walking out of the room as they looked at the two boys with confusion before shrugging. As soon as they were gone, the two boys entered her room with a knock as she called them forth. Looking at their faces, Yaoyorozu could almost immediately imagine what the two were about to do. As much as I would prefer that you don't go out there to save Bakugo-kun, you probably will go without me, won't you? Yaoyorozu asked, as Izuku shook his head. It all depends on your answer for our question. Izuku said, as Kirishima nodded. What is this question? She asked. Bakugo is someone that I admire, and I can't help but think that if we don't at least try and save him from the villains. I can't call myself a hero if I don't even try to save him. I can't trust the heroes to protect us kids at the moment. Kirishima said, as Momo nodded before turning to Izuku. What's your reason for saving Bakugo-kun? She asked, as Izuku spoke. Bakugo was someone I grew up with when I first arrived on the planet. I was taken at the age of 4 and brought into the Jedi Order and watched them all die off because their hubris had caused their end. I will not stand by and watch a friend that I had come to respect and admire as well, die because he won't join the villains. And I personally think that with your help, we can save Bakugo from a harsh fate, similar to. You know, Izuku said, as Momo gained a sad face. As much as I would love to assist you both in your endeavor. I cannot allow this to go unwarranted. I'm sorry, but you will get no help from me, but I will warn you that if you do this, you will be punished by Aizawa-sensei. Momo said, as Izuku nodded. I don't care about being a hero. I was already a hero for the outer rim of the galaxy with my master. If I am expelled, so be it. Izuku said, as he walked out the room. Kirishima looked between Yaoyorozu and Izuku before nodding at her and leaving the room as well. So you know where they took him? Kirishima asked, as Izuku shook his head. I will need to move across the area that they could have crossed in the time frame that allowed them to appear, take Bakugo and disappear. They couldn't have gone far, and from what I know about my senses within the Force, Bakugo's Force energy is in Kamino Ward, Izuku said, as the two took off. Whilst the two moved towards Kamino Ward, they had run into Shoto as the boy stated that he wished to join them in rescuing their classmate from the villains. He had heard about Mina's death and wanted to make sure that another one of their classmates doesn't meet the same fate. And the trio had then run into Yaoyorozu, who had snuck out of her home in order to make sure that they follow a set plan in order to rescue Bakugo and not fight the group. Bakugo had been in the villain's custody for all but 2 days now, and their group were moving throughout the crowds in order to find where the boy was located. The group had arrived just outside of a warehouse as they prepared to enter it and search for Katsuki when they saw the news. The heroes were making a statement that this will be the second and final time that the villains will get past their security. And this will not be tolerated anymore. The first time was just luck, the second time was just asking for Nezu to release all his anger out on them when he found out about the dead student of the Ishido family. He gave a formal apology towards the family who had lost their child, and he focused on making sure that he wouldn't have to do that to another family. He also made mention that the heroes were currently doing everything they could in order to find and detain the League of Villains. Shaking their heads from the news, the four had walked towards the warehouse and searched the inside of it through one of the windows. It was really dark, so when Yaoyorozu had made a heat vision binoculars, they had seen multiple pods of Nomu inside waiting to be used. All the students were very concerned, and Izuku had thrown up from the mix of quirks as well as souls within the Nomus themselves. They then made a plan in order to get inside and break Bakugo out when Izuku made a note of Bakugo's glaring lack of a presence within the place. There was also the fact that there was someone else's presence within it, and he was not liking their presence at all. He had pulled the 3 other students away from the building as they hid behind a wall as they thought about a new plan for the moment. And as they were conversing with one another, on the other side of Kamino Ward inside a bar, the heroes had raided the place and knocked out multiple villains in order to save Bakugo. And as soon as All Might and the other heroes were about to get Bakugo out of the area, every villain, including Bakugo himself, were warped out of the area with black sludge to Izuku's location. The heroes had attacked the warehouse as well as they were preparing to destroy it completely. But the presence inside used a power that allowed them to transport the mixed souls of the Nomu towards another place, and Izuku immediately knew that this was a major villain. Looking over the wall separating them and the villain, Izuku felt a massive oppressing force moving throughout the area. The heroes were on the ground, having been nearly wiped out had it not been for number 4 hero, Best Jeanist. As the man panted, Izuku heard a voice he had faintly recognized as someone who could have been the Chancellor in his heyday. Best Jeanist, it was a pleasure to see you use your quirk like that. Too bad I don't want it. That kind of quirk would be extremely useful against my foes. But I need to keep you away from my successor. The very calm and condescending voice called out, amused. I wouldn't be a hero if I didn't save others. The hero Best Jeanist quipped. Well, far be it from me to end you before you reach your full potential. The villain called out. What happened next was instant. A bunch of black goo had appeared in the air as Bakugo and the villains had arrived at the supervillains area. Bakugo was instantly on alert as he glared at the villains as well as the one in a suit and tie, and it was here that Izuku discreetly used his telekinesis part of the force to pull the unconscious heroes away from the battlefield as well as move Best Jeanist to his location. The hero was initially alarmed at how a bunch of kids were here until Izuku gave him their plan to get Bakugo out of the area. Izuku also informed the hero that he was quirkless on paper but could help out wherever he could. Once the hero gave him permission to use the force, he told the others to leave the area whilst he and Izuku worked together to get Bakugo out of there. The group protested but were silenced by Best Jeanist telling them that he won't allow children into this kind of fight. It's way above their pay grade as well as level. You will continue to sway him to your side, Tamura. I have full faith in you in order to complete this task. The villain told his successor as Tamura glared at Katsuki. I won't be joining your asses, crusty and metal head. Bakugo called out, activating his quirk. I don't need to have you on my team, Explodey, I just need to kill you if you don't join me. Tamura said, as he raced towards the boy only to be exploded away. Whilst those two were fighting one another, the villain looked in another direction as All Might came out of the woodworks with fury written in his face. I will have your head for killing my students. All for one. All Might screamed out in fury. That took you quite a bit longer than usual to reach me, All Might. It appears that you have gotten weaker. That will make your death all the much more fun. The villain said, as the two went blow for blow. Both groups of villains and heroes had launched into the fray, attacking one another, preparing to end the battle as soon as possible. Shockwaves of the two juggernauts were causing the battle between Bakugo and Tamura to be interrupted. But that was all Izuku needed as he threw out his lightsaber with it ignited as it sliced off Tamura's left arm at the shoulder. As the young man screamed in agony, All for One looked over at his successor to find the injured man fallen to the ground screaming in agony. He looked over at the one who did it and was surprised that a boy with green hair was running towards Bakugo. He watched as Izuku lifted his hand and raised the explosive boy and toss him away before looking towards him. He could use this to bring an end to the symbol of peace. At least he would, if he hadn't gotten punched in the face for his trouble of looking away from his opponent. The two would continue to trade blows, before a short old man entered the fray and had landed a small strike to the villain's back, causing All for One to grab him and toss him in the way of All Might's next attack, sending the old man flying away. But as soon as All for One was about to attack All Might to send him into a nearby building, he felt his whole body seize movement before being lifted into the air and tossed straight up into the atmosphere. Looking down for a moment, he found Izuku had moved closer and had been the culprit for attacking him unawares. Back on the ground though. "Young Midoriya, what are you doing here?" All Might asked, as he stood in front of Izuku whilst All for One fell from the sky into the ground. "I'm about to do something that you really should have done before you had killed him," Izuku said, as he turned to look at the villain as he moved towards them. "Really? Sending a child to fight me? That is really low of you, All Might," All for One said, chuckling. "I wouldn't need to do this, but the boy trusts his own strength. I believe that we heroes need to regain the trust of our students in another way, but not like this," All Might said, as Izuku moved towards the villain. "What are you going to do, little boy, throw me around with your telekinesis?" All for One taunted. "No, but do you know a girl with pink skin and hair, black sclera and golden pupils?" Izuku asked, as All for One stopped his taunts before thinking about his answer. "Oh, you mean the free-spirited girl whose quirk I took because it could be used?" "Why yes I do. I killed her without a second thought. I'm surprised she didn't notice my presence until too late," All for One said, boasting. What happened next caused everyone, including the press in a nearby helicopter, to freeze as well as scream in fear and confusion. Izuku merely raised his hand in the air as he grasped for the villain's throat whilst not being anywhere near the villain himself. All for One was lifted into the air as he gasped for air that his body was restricting from itself from an outside source. All for One raised his hand to try and steal the quirk of the boy who was causing him all this pain, but as soon as the pieces of his rebar quirk entered the boy's body, he felt nothing. That was when he was brought over to the boy as he watched the emerald eyes move from their green color to slitted golden yellow eyes. "You took away something, no, someone who was my classmate, my friend. You took away something that we couldn't ever get back. When I am done with you, you won't be able to be brought back," Izuku muttered to the villain before an ignition sound was heard. Multiple sounds of the same ignition sound were heard as the helicopter with the reporter inside watched as a 15-year-old boy nearly sliced the villain who seemingly gave All Might a run for his money to pieces. They had heard what he told the villain as well, and they were horrified that he would kill someone like this in front of the world. Back to the boy though. Everyone watched as he stared at the body of All for One as he tried to regenerate back to his full height. It took a few fearful minutes, but he had managed to do it. As he coughed through his apparatus, Izuku merely swung his blade again, causing it to all apart, revealing the villain's eyeless as well as nose-less face. Said villain coughed harshly as he fell to a knee in front of the boy as Izuku stood in front of him with a cold expression with his arm raised. And he went on to continue slicing the villain's body until it wouldn't regenerate anymore, and the villain let out a cry of horror as he watched as the boy's eyes went from a golden yellow, back to an emerald green on the verge of changing color again. And with the last moments of his life within the hands of Izuku, the boy used the force to tear apart the villain limb from limb all the way down to the atoms in his body as everyone watched as All for One was reduced to mere blood and plasma. Izuku was standing before the blood splatter of the now dead All for One on the ground. He had been thinking about how life would be like without the villain in the way for everyone to smile. In his mind, taking out All for One right here and now, especially since he had killed someone who gave everyone smiles just from her mere presence. It hurt him. Mina may not have been someone who was really close to him, but he did know that the girl was one of his close friends who had gotten to know him on a deeper level compared to the rest of his classmates. So when he had heard that All for One had killed the girl before she could even react to his presence back at the camp, His mind went blank for the first time in his life as he willingly allowed himself to be consumed by the dark side completely. But by the time he had managed to completely defeat and kill All for One, Izuku could only stare at the villain as his blood splatter was giving him a sad feeling. He had killed a villain for revenge of his classmate. That was not how a Jedi should act, nor should a hero act. So as he stood over the blood splatter, he never noticed how some heroes and police officers were coming towards him with slight fear as well as caution. Turning around towards them, Izuku silently placed his hands in the air as he kneeled before them all as he allowed them to, surprisingly, softly take him towards the other heroes and police. Whilst everyone was watching the scene on television, they were confused as to why Izuku had been surrendering himself to the police and heroes. He had defeated a villain that could kill All Might if he had been allowed to do so, so they were confused as to why the heroes and police were arresting the young man. And as they went onto the internet to talk about how the boy shouldn't be punished for putting a villain that All Might himself couldn't defeat down, others who were very scared and fearful of Izuku's strength and power argued how he should be put away for killing a man. And whilst that was happening on the internet, a certain chimera was doing his hardest to protect one of his students who shouldn't have been there at all. And all he could think of at that point in time was how powerful he had to be in order to merely cause All for One, the strongest villain in the known world, to be defeated and turned into a complete blood splatter on the ground. Izuku sat inside the interrogation room as he stayed as quiet as possible whilst he was thinking about everything he'd done towards the villain. He knew the man deserved his death, much less a death that was so painful and gruesome towards himself. He didn't know about the horrors that All for One had done in the past, but that didn't mean he never saw the danger of leaving such a man alive within the world. He knew that based on Master Windu's decision to try and take the metaphorical head of the snake at the top of the body. Izuku had done the same with different results. Instead of being killed for attempting to do so, he was arrested for completing that mission, and now he waited for himself to be transported over to Tartarus for his murder of such a villain. He didn't have to wait long before a certain detective had entered the room with Principal Nedzu as they sat down at the table. Both were quiet for quite some time before both sighed and they began to look at the seemingly mute boy and spoke to him. "My name is Detective Naomasa Tsukauchi, and it is my job in order to ask you for why you thought it was all right to enter a battlefield between a hero and villain." Detective Tsukauchi said, looking at Izuku. "I was there in order to save Bakugo Katsuki. I had just decided to stay since I noticed how All Might himself was slowly becoming more and more weak the longer he fought that villain." Izuku said, as Naomasa nodded. "All right, now for the hard part. Why did you kill the villain?" Naomasa questioned as Izuku looked up at him with teary eyes. He told me that he had killed a classmate of mine. Ashido Mina. He said that he killed her before she could even realize that he was right behind her. And when I heard him say that, everything in my mind went blank, as if everything I had ever known just disappeared." Izuku said, as he looked at the table and pulled his hands out and placed them on it. Both Principal Nedzu and Tsukauchi were staring in shock at how Izuku had heard this kind of information. Not only that, but the simple fact that his mind went blank after hearing it. Only one thing could have happened in that moment when Izuku had suddenly became more ruthless in his fight against the villain. He had fallen to the dark side for that portion of the fight and ended it without a second thought and giving the villain the harshest death anyone could ever receive. The simple fact that Izuku never stated that he let the dark side of the Force consume him for those precious few moments left a large hole in their stomachs. And it was here that Principal Nedzu stared at Izuku for a moment before looking to Tsukauchi. "Is there a law for someone who is not of this planet being capable of murdering a villain?" Nedzu asked, looking concerned. "Not in the laws of Japan, nor the world." "What are you asking, Principal?" Tsukauchi asked, as Izuku looked to him. "Well, I think it's high time we tell the world just what in the galaxy he is. Not only that, but that he is a part of a dead religion within the known universe. A religion who was killed because their hubris caused them to not see their own demise, and how he wishes to revive the dead religion to become better than before. A religion who will not allow certain villains and evil entities to live long enough to become a massive threat." Nedzu said, his face grim. "Are you sure that you want to tell the world that Izuku is not from this world?" Naomasa asked, concerned before looking to Izuku. "I may have been born on this world, but by the time I was 4. I was brought away from the planet in order to be trained to become a Jedi. The moment I left the planet for more than a year, I relinquished my right to be an Earthling. Izuku said, as he looked to Nedzu. Are you sure about your words? You came back, albeit around 10 years later, you already have regained your citizenship within Japan during that time. Nedzu said, as Izuku shook his head. The world needs to know that the known galaxy is quite larger than they think. If it means that my safety is put to the side, so be it. I may not like the press, but even I know that if everyone realizes that a young man protected the symbol of peace from death, what do you think will happen if they think they should rely on children instead of adults? Izuku asked, as both gained grim thoughts. Children would essentially become child soldiers for the government around the world, and people would rely on children to keep them safe instead of experienced veterans. Sukachi said, as Izuku nodded. My time as an Earthling had passed the moment I left the planet to train under Master Yoda. It's high time the world knows that they are not the only species that exists in the known universe. Izuku said, as he pulled out a small hollow disc from his pocket. If the people don't believe your words, then show them this hollow disc. It has my master before the end of the Jedi Order had happened speaking to this device. I had kept it on my person ever since Order 66 was called out on Coruscant. Izuku said, as he prepared himself to be put away. With that said and done, a few officers had entered the room and pulled the boy out of the interrogation room in order to place him within a cell. With what Izuku had given both of them, they both prepared for a massive meeting with the press, and they had contacted the government to have it shown across the world. Everyone needed to hear about this, and with Izuku being placed behind bars for the time being, they needed to act fast in order to save him from a fate worse than death. As Izuku sat inside the new truck that was to transport him over to Tartarus prison, he sighed to himself as he thought about the people nearest to him. Momo, Uraraka and Hagakure were the ones on his mind as he started to let out tears of sadness. He had wanted to stay near the girls he had fortunately fallen for since the start of the year, as he had gotten to learn how they acted, what they liked, and most importantly, how their smiles made his heart flutter. As tears fell from his eyes, he never noticed how some of the soldiers inside the truck were looking at him not in disgust, but in complete confusion. Are you sure that we're supposed to take a child such as him to Tartarus? A soldier asked, as another shook his head. I don't know, but we have our orders. Bring him to Tartarus. If he even attempts to escape from the vehicle, we have orders to put him down. If he was able to take down the Camino Ward villain, then we need to set our guns to be able to kill him if we need to. The second soldier said, voice grim. Well, personally I think we shouldn't be bringing him to prison. How old is he? 15. Another voice asked, as the others sighed. It's against our orders to not bring him to Tartarus prison. But I don't think this kid deserves to be placed there. It's a place where true villains live, not where someone like him is supposed to be. The first soldier said, sadly. Once the truck had taken off towards Tartarus prison, as Izuku sat in the back of the truck, we returned back to Ua Academy as Principal Nedzu as he prepared for the meeting of his life. He would never tell anyone how nervous he truly was when it came to something as dangerous and concerning as this. As he set his papers for a small moment, he let out a sigh of sadness as he thought about the loss of one of his more promising students within his school. Once this was done, once this was shown that Izuku was technically born on this planet but was raised elsewhere in the unknown galaxy, this would mark the moment where the space race would be brought back from the undead. Taking a deep breath, he put on his best intimidating smile as the curtains metaphorically had dropped, allowing him and Sukachi to be revealed before the press as they took pictures as well as stared at them with both concern and caution. Hello everyone of both the world and Japan. I am here to inform you about everything that had happened between now and when the student of Ua Academy, Midoriya Izuku, had left planet Earth and learned of the life of those outside of our planet. Nedzu said, a grim smile on his face. The effect was immediate, as the crowd had immediately gone up in arms as they asked hundreds of questions about Izuku and how he was able to see the unknown galaxy and universe without a mode of transportation. Calm down, we can't answer so many questions when you are switching them up. Naomasa called out to them. I guess we should answer one question from this crowd. Nedzu said, looking at a certain man who had camera lenses poking out of his skin. Hello Principal Nedzu sir, I come from a private journalist group that prefers to stay quiet. The man said, as Nedzu nodded. I would like to ask the question that is probably on our minds. Is Midoriya Izuku really of this planet, and an alien? Or are you lying in order to protect the boy? The man asked, as Nezu smiled at the man softly. As much as I would love to say that I am protecting him by lying to you all, I have to say that he was born of our planet but was taken away to be trained by an ancient religion within the unknown galaxy to us. He showed the ability to use a power that we know is gifted to those at the age of 4 on our planet known as a quirk. But the ability that young Midoriya himself uses is something that he was taught to learn was called the Force. Something that lives within all creatures, even us on our pitiful planet of dirt and water. But in order to tell you all more about the young man himself, I should probably tell you the story of how he lived before coming back to Earth about a full 10 years before he started his time under the UA Academy school grounds. Nezu said, as he began to take a deep breath to speak about all the journeys of Midoriya Izuku before he came back to Earth in a hurry. It was a beautiful day within Musutafu, and Izuku was playing with his friends at the time. Although playing was putting it softly about what Izuku was really doing in that playground that day. He was protecting a young boy from being the target of Bakugo Katsuki's rage, although Izuku was staring at Bakugo with a fearful expression on his face. Kei-Kachan. D, don't do it. He didn't mean it, he's sorry. Little Izuku called out. What is the quirkless Deku saying? I thought that you weren't capable of standing up to us. Are you? Katsuki asked, his 4-year-old self angered. Kei-Kachan, now's not the time to do this. This isn't how a hero should act. Izuku called out, as Bakugo growled at him. Take that back. Bakugo yelled, throwing explosions out at Izuku. Unknown to either of them, a weird feeling around them protected Izuku from being blown up by his old friend. And as soon as Izuku looked over at whoever was protecting him, he found a small green man who was just slightly taller than he was. He had long green ears with some white hairs growing from his head as he hobbled over with a singular hand pushing softly at the explosion in front of him. Bakugo noticed this as well as he glared at the newcomer in fury as he pushed as hard with his quirk as he could. Powerful you are with your quirk, but should you be using your quirk where people can see you? The new arrival asked. Why, you're not my boss, Katsuki called out, before he ran off. Who are you? Izuku asked, as the new arrival stared at Izuku for a second. My name will be told later. What is your name? The new arrival asked. Midoriya is Izuku. The boy said, as the new arrival smiled. Young Midoriya, come. Show me to where you live. Proposition I have for you. The new arrival said, as Izuku felt that the new guy was really nice. One, he did protect him from Kachan, so this guy had to be a good person. Right. And that is what happened. Izuku walked with the older fellow as they made their way to the apartment that he and his mother lived in. As soon as the door was knocked on, Inko opened it up to find her son staring at her with slight tears in his eyes. And in an instant her motherly instincts kicked in. Picking her baby up from the ground, she had then noticed how someone else was there. And she couldn't fathom about the amount of presence this little old man held as he stood there looking at them with a serene expression. Who are you? Inko asked. My name is Yoda. You and your son. Much to talk about we do, Yoda said, smiling. So let me get this straight, you are an alien? Inko asked, as Yoda nodded. And you came here because you were searching for a place to rest your old bones? Inko asked, as Yoda once again nodded. And you just came across my son being bullied by his friend, and you noticed something odd about his own abilities. Even though he's quirkless? Inko asked, as Yoda nodded before speaking. A test, I would like to give. Test his midichlorian count, I must. With permission from you, I ask. Yoda asked, as Inko thought about it. Well, if this could help my son get over his hero addiction, then I can't help but give his dream a chance. Inko thought before giving the old alien a nod. Yoda would then pull out a tiny needle as he pricked Izuku's finger as the boy just watched in fascination. He watched as Yoda took out a weird tool that only doctors have, and he placed it inside of a small vial. The trio would watch the vial for a few moments before Yoda hummed in astonishment. Putting the vial away, he smiled at the Midoriya family as he began to speak to them about the test results. High midichlorian count you do, young Midoriya. Strong in the force you are. Yoda complimented. What is this force? Inko found herself asking. The force, within many things it is. Guides us through darkness it is, lives within every living thing it does. Even in death, Everything returns to the Force, Yoda said, as Izuku was awed. So does that mean I can become a hero? Izuku asked, as Yoda stared at him for a second. Hero, you say? Tell me, what do heroes do? Yoda questioned. Heroes are really powerful people who protect the weak. They fight villains in an attempt to make sure that they don't hurt people who are innocent. No, innocent, Izuku said, with a happy smile on his face. Heroes are similar to what I am. Jedi I am. Protect the Republic I do, although we can protect the weak and frail. Jedi is similar to heroes. Yoda said, looking at Inko, who was giving him an odd look. Will you be protecting my baby boy if you do this? Inko asked, as Yoda looked at her. Protect him I will. Train him in the Force, I will. Come back home, he will. Yoda said, with finality by stomping his cane on the ground with determination. Izuku, do you want to train under this alien to become what is similar to a hero? Inko asked, as Izuku sat there thinking. See, could I become a hero still with my Jedi training? Izuku asked, as Yoda stared at him for a moment. Yes, train in the arts of a Jedi you will. Become a hero you must. Protect the weak is your destiny, Yoda said, with a smirk on his face. Inko smiled at Yoda as she spoke to the old man of an alien. Well, if you are going to train him to become a hero, then far be it from me to hold my son back. Is there a reason as to why he needs to be trained now of all times? Inko asked, as Yoda sighed. The Jedi are similar to a cult. We train younglings from an age before they make attachments. Having those will bring one to the dark side of the Force. Having attachments causes one to do things considered. Not the Jedi way, Yoda said, as Izuku nodded. What happens to those who hold attachments and fall to the dark side? Inko asked, as Yoda hummed. Either they are expelled from the Order itself, or they join the Sith. An ancient group of fallen Jedi who search for power only, wishing to become stronger for the sake of gaining power. Yoda explained as Inko nodded. You will train my boy to not fall for the influence of power, right? Inko asked, as Yoda gave a firm nod. Then I hope that you can train my son in the best way you can. I want my son to be capable of defending himself in the future, and I can't wait to see what he can become. Inko stated as she gave Yoda a handshake. With that said and done, Yoda took Izuku out of his home with some of his house supplies to go to Coruscant with the old master. As the two came up to the small ship that belonged to the Grand Master of the Order of Jedi, the two entered the ship as they took off towards the sky. Izuku watched as the Earth slowly became a small orb in the galaxy, and he was surprised with how the world was really just a very big circle in terms of looks. He was in awe as he watched the planet soon disappear in the distance, and Yoda began to teach Izuku the arts of a Jedi on their ship. He made certain that Izuku knew to trust entirely on the Force, and not to rely on fighting styles and strength. Izuku would prove to be a quick learner as well, considering that whatever Yoda made sure Izuku remembered, the boy would write it down in a notebook. He even had a smile on his face as he learned how to use the Force on their way to the planet where the Jedi Temple was located. Within a few hours, the two exited out of hyperspace as Yoda made the unanimous decision to erase the location of Earth from the ship's travelogues. He knew that a planet of superpowered humans would cause some kind of problems with the Republic, especially those who didn't have power of their own to use. The more political ones would be the ones who would attempt to take the planet over and turn those who are on the planet's surface into slaves for their government. With Yoda taking notice how Earth was within the central planets within the known galaxy, he let out a sigh when they lowered onto Coruscant's surface. The ship landed in the Jedi Temple's docking bay, and it brought some certain individuals to be seen by the old master towards them. Master Yoda, I thought you were taking a break for a while? An older man asked. Taking a break I was, found this boy I did. Strong in the Force, he is. Yoda said, as he pulled out the test. Who should be the one to train him? A black male asked, as he looked at Izuku. Train him, I will. Dooku's training, complete it is. New Padawan I need. Yoda stated with finality. Should I teach him some of my fighting styles as well, master? The black-skinned male asked. Teach him everything you know, when I'm not around. Yes. Yoda stated before leading Izuku away. As Yoda walked Izuku through the halls of the Jedi Temple, Izuku watched as the tall black male had been keeping an eye on him from afar. He waved at the man with a smile on his face, which coincidentally brought a small smile to the man before he walked away. Young Izuku, that was Master Ki-gon and Master Windu. They will be the ones you will be seeing a lot around here, same with my own Padawan Dooku. Learn from your peers, you must. Yoda explained as Izuku gave a hum of approval. So, are you all like heroes of the galaxy or something? Izuku asked, as Yoda gave a nod. We protect the Republic, yes. Yoda said, as Izuku gained a confused expression. What about the areas outside the Republic's reach? Izuku asked, as he walked in line with Yoda. Outside of the Republic's reach, you say? Yoda asked, as Izuku nodded. Isn't there people outside of the Republic's reach that need the help of the Jedi? Izuku asked, as Yoda thought about it. There were indeed many planets that needed Jedi presence on them in order to keep them from being taken over. Thinking about it more, his new Padawan was maybe a bit too smart for his own good. It would be a pleasure to increase the boy's cunning as well as skill with both the Force and lightsaber combat. But the problem the old master had at the moment, however, was what Ki-gon had informed him before the old master traveled to Earth. The fact that the Chosen One had been found on a planet of slaves, Tatooine, and was only around 5 years of age. And he wanted to train the boy to become a Jedi like them all, mainly himself. With Izuku's presence, this caused the old master to think about the time he had spent as the leader of the Jedi Order as a whole. Maybe I should retire from being Grand Master, Yoda thought, as he looked to Izuku. If I were to give you a list of people who could become the next Grand Master of the Jedi Order, who would you choose? Yoda asked cryptically. I would want someone who is nice and kind to become the leader after me. They need to prioritize the protection of those who are weak, like the heroes of my world. You are a separate entity, right? Izuku asked, as Yoda hummed. Outside the influence of the Senate we are. Thank you for your opinion. Yoda said, as he brought the boy into his bedroom within the temple. This is your room for the foreseeable future. If there is anything you wish to talk about, contact me through the Force. Yoda said, as he left the boy to the bedroom. Leaving Izuku in the bedroom to explore and prepare it for his future endeavors, Yoda moved to return to the council chambers. Once there, he sat down in his seat as he felt through the Force to see if there would be something that would change. And as soon as he sensed it, he found that the entire galaxy was covered in darkness, something that clouded his vision about who was causing it. Letting out a sigh, he felt as though his time as the Grand Master was over, but he would still train those he saw fit to become a Jedi Knight. He called a meeting between the Jedi Masters on the council to make an announcement to them all. Yoda wanted them all to know about his plans to become a teacher for the younglings, and not as the Grand Master. Within the next few minutes, the council chambers were filled as each council member were in their seat looking to the Grand Master for what his announcement was. Retiring from the role of Grand Master, I am. Incapable of sensing the dark side, I am. Yoda explained. Who will become the Grand Master with you retiring? Mace Windu asked, as Yoda hummed. The new Grand Master of the Jedi Order will be Uapo Rancis. Lead the Jedi Order to become better than we are now. The Master of the Jedi will still be you, Master Windu. Yoda said, as Mace nodded. What will we do about Anakin Skywalker? Appo asked, as Yoda thought about Izuku's words. I would want someone who is nice and kind to become the leader after me. They need to prioritize the protection of those who are weak, like the heroes of my world. Izuku stated. Train Anakin Skywalker we must, if he is the chosen one. He must be trained to overcome the dark side of the Force and bring balance to the Force. Yoda said, with a stomp of his cane. Then we will begin his training at once, when he returns from his journey with Master Qui-Gon Jinn. Mace Windu said, as Yoda left the room with a hum. The old master would walk through the halls of the Jedi Temple as he thought about where the Jedi Order should restart essentially. In the event that the Jedi are forced away from Coruscant, they would need a place to evacuate in order to keep themselves alive. He looked at multiple planets within the known galaxy, that not even the Chancellor of Coruscant knew about. He soon found the planet that was out of its sight, and thought that it'd be perfect for the reconstruction of the Jedi Order. Master Yoda moved over to the communicator as he smiled at the small planet of dirt and water with a fond expression on his face. A voice would answer the call as Master Qui-Gon Jinn would answer Master Yoda. This is Qui-Gon, Master Yoda. What do I owe the pleasure of speaking to you? Qui-Gon asked. Master Qui-Gon, Many things have happened whilst you were gone. Retired from my position of Grand Master, I have. As well as young Skywalker, he will be trained by you. Early on, train him you must, Yoda said, as he looked into Qui-Gon's hologram projection. It will be done, Master. Anything else we should be prepared for? Qui-Gon asked. Master Oppo Rancis has been elected as the Grand Master of the Order. Mace Windu will be assisting me in training the boy I came with this morning. Yoda said, as Qui-Gon nodded. What's his personality like? Qui-Gon questioned. Very fond of heroes, he is. I believe I owe you an apology, Master Qui-Gon. Yoda said, as Qui-Gon gave him a concerned expression. If this is about the boy, then you have no reason to, you are doing what your job entails. Qui-Gon said, as Yoda shook his head. No, I judged the boy you wish to train based on his age as well as attachments. The boy I have has attachments, and he wishes to become a hero. I have a long road ahead of myself to train him, Yoda said, as Qui-Gon chuckled. Have patience, Master, he may even surprise you. Qui-Gon said, ending the transmission. Already has, surprised me he did. Yoda muttered as he looked at a small notebook. Quirk Analysis for the Future Volume 2. Yoda stayed within the Jedi Temple today. He wanted to clear his mind of all-encompassing thoughts as he read the small notebook his new Padawan gave him. It held information about heroes and villains the boy had seen in the past, and it was very informative. Holding it in front of his eyes, he looked at how the notes were taken and smiled to himself as he came up with an idea of how he should train the boy. Izuku had a great mind, and it would be up to Grandmaster Yoda in order to completely help the boy foster his mind to the point that he could become a very deadly opponent. If that were to happen, Izuku himself might become so powerful in the light side of the Force. He would be unstoppable, the perfect successor to the title of Grand Master of the Jedi Order, and as he thought this over, he felt the presence of his Padawan outside his door. Opening it with the force, he found his Padawan standing there in awe before he excused his presence at the door and entering. Once the doors were closed behind him, Yoda kept his eyes firmly on the boy's eyes just to allow him to feel safe. Brings you to my room, what does? Yoda questioned. When are we going to continue Chi training? Izuku asked, nervously. Worry not, young Midoriya. Much to discuss we do, Yoda said, pulling the boy with the force onto a chair. What will we be doing first, sir? Izuku asked, getting a little hyper. Meditate on the force, we must. Control the amount of power you use, you do. Yoda wisely said, as he entered a meditative seat. Okay, I hope to impress you, Master. Izuku said, mimicking Yoda's seated stance. Now, fully meditate, you must do this, eyes must be closed. Feel the force around the room, Yoda said, as Izuku listened to his every word and followed it. Oh, okay, Master. Izuku stuttered. Feel, what is it you feel? Yoda questioned. I feel nothing, Izuku suddenly said, as Yoda nodded. Feeling the force comes with great training. Your midichlorians are large, so using the force comes naturally. To master the force, great training is done, Yoda said, as Izuku nodded. Now, feel for what you can use in a fight, such as a book or chair, or probably a dead body on the ground. Yoda said, as Izuku bristled at the dead body comment. Wouldn't that mean I'm desecrating the dead? Izuku asked, opening his eyes concerned. Dead they may be, but a weapon is still a weapon. Bury the dead after battle, we do. But not in the moment, we bury our allies. Yoda stated with a soft rap of his cane on the ground. For the next few hours, the two were in his room meditating, and for a while Izuku felt nothing, until he found himself floating in the air as if he was flying with a small hover quirk. He looked at his master to find the old alien staring at him in pride, but that wasn't all. He seemed to be remembering something of his past. So letting go of the force, he softly landed on the pillow he sat on and spoke out to Yoda, breaking him from his musings. Master Yoda? Are you okay? Izuku asked, as Yoda shook his head. Fine, I am. What is wrong? Yoda asked. Why, you look like you are reliving something. Izuku said, as Yoda nodded. Reminiscing on the past, I was. Count Dooku, you know of him, yes? Yoda questioned. He left the Jedi Order before I came here, didn't he? Izuku asked, as Yoda nodded. believes that the Jedi serves the Senate he does. But we do not serve the Republic we do, Yoda said, as Izuku shook his head. The Jedi shouldn't serve one group of people though. They should serve everyone. Be the hero that some worlds don't have. Izuku retorted as Yoda let out a huff of laughter. If heroes we are, who protects us? Yoda asked, as Izuku felt himself think. Well, couldn't two Jedi take care of a planet? Then spread our influence across the galaxy? Making sure that the Jedi Order is never forgotten to time? Izuku asked, as Yoda smirked. Correct. But not enough Jedi to do that we have. Yoda stated. Then why don't you explore the galaxy and do just that? That would put the Jedi in a much greater light than what you show on a daily basis. Izuku said, as Yoda sat there to think about it. Great points you make, great Jedi you will become. What you do in the future, great hope of seeing, I am. Yoda said, with a small smile. Over the next few weeks, Izuku and Yoda were seen meditating inside his chambers. The two were only attempting to have Izuku learn how to keep all his power within the Force held back. They couldn't afford for Izuku to let his full power out without it causing damage outside. Izuku however was thriving with the meditation training. It allowed him to clear his mind as he boosted the space within his mind. As the two were currently inside of the Jedi Temple as they stood across from one another. Yoda was currently teaching Izuku how to use the Vipod technique as it was something Master Windu had learned earlier on in his life. Izuku however was showing great potential for using its powerful and precise strikes against him. But there was something off about the way he was utilizing the form. It was as if he was combining it with another. And that is when Yoda saw it. It was a mixture of Vipod and Soresu with Yoda acknowledging the powerful and precise movements. He smirked. This would be a fun opponent to come across in the future, not to mention seeing how Izuku would handle a Sith Lord in the future using this very technique. The two would remain in combat until the last few hours of the day when someone entered the room calling for Master Yoda's presence. Looking over at who had entered, Izuku saw an older man who appeared to be in his late 50s as he looked completely distraught. Master. There's grave news, the new man said, as he took a knee in front of the old Grand Master. What happened? Tell me, Yoda said, in his wise but concerned tone. Master Qui-Gon Jinn had entered combat with a Zabrakian warrior. But there is an issue, the man said, as he looked over at Izuku finally taking in his presence. What happened? Yoda inquired. The Zabrak had a lightsaber, a red one. The man said, as Yoda became contemplative, it appears that the Sith have finally returned. Enter battle I must. Yoda said, as he prepared to leave. Master, who is this? Izuku asked, as Yoda looked to Izuku with a calm smile. Master Dooku. This is my newest Padawan. Young Izuku Midoriya. Young Izuku, Master Dooku. Go, I must. Protect the Chosen One, I will. Train young Midoriya, you should. Yoda said, as he looked to Dooku. I will do my best in order to train the boy while you're gone. Dooku said, as Yoda nodded and left. Izuku took in the man now that he knew his name. Master Dooku was heralded around the Jedi Temple as the best duelist there was. Aside from Master Windu and Master Yoda of course, but there was something off about him through the Force. It was though he was holding himself back from doing something horrible, so horrible that he needed to come here to tell Yoda about it. But with the old Grand Master being gone, Izuku was now all alone with him as Dooku looked in his direction. So you are young Midoriya, the one who has a similar midichlorian count as my master. Dooku surmised. I guess. I don't know why I should be heralded as someone strong. I'm still training. Izuku said, as Dooku chuckled. And you're humble as well, there truly hasn't been a Jedi like you yet. But I am getting ahead of myself. I need to know what kind of form you are using so we can get into physical training. Dooku said, as Izuku nodded. I use a mixture of Vipod and Soresu. I wanted to see if I could use two fighting forms to create a new one. Izuku said, lifting his blade. Well then show me your skill with your early age. Dooku said, pulling out a curved hilt of a blade. Igniting his blue lightsaber, Izuku ignited his own training lightsaber that was green in color. For Dooku the man thought that the color fit Izuku. Considering the boy was basically the color green, he wouldn't even mind if it was the boy's favorite color. And as soon as the two entered combat, Izuku used Sorasu's stance to block a hit before switching into Vapad in order to use Dooku's emotions against him. They clashed blades over and over again as they made sure to test the waters of their strengths. Izuku finally decided to get slightly more aggressive as he went into a flurry of attacks, and Dooku was surprised by the boy's speed for a moment before schooling his features. He countered each and every strike that Izuku sent his way with grace, so much so that Izuku had mimicked his own counter-strikes twice over in their training. He smiled to himself as the two entered combat once more as he decided to show the boy some more moves he loved to use. As the boy memorized the stances for each one and how to utilize them in combat, Dooku watched as Izuku's eyes suddenly gained a small glint in them. Something similar that happened in his past when he found a way to get through an impenetrable defense. Izuku then changed his styles to completely use Vapad as he tried to overwhelm the precise and graceful strikes that Dooku had used earlier. Izuku mimicked the grace Dooku used in his own attacks as the man himself smiled at Izuku with pride. Not even about an hour into their physical training, and the boy was already showing that he was a prodigy in battle. He would watch an opponent use a certain move and would make sure to use it in his repertoire later on as a surprise move. By the time their training was over, Izuku was laying on the ground as he had swirls in his eyes. He was utterly exhausted as Dooku stood above him with a small sweat breaking his forehead. "That was a fun match, boy. I can't believe that you gave me a challenge. I should duel you from time to time. You can keep me on my toes all the time," Dooku said, chuckling. "It was really hard to predict your movements. It was as if every move you made was absolutely perfect," Izuku said with a happy smile. "That's because I trained my entire life learning the fighting style I am the master of. I call it Makashi. It allows me to make quick and swift but more precise strikes against my foes. From what I can see, you are the only one who can counter my attacks," Dooku said, before Yoda entered the room with a sad aura. Izuku ran over to the old master as he attempted to see what was wrong, as the old master looked as though he lost a part of himself. Dooku was staring at his master with concern. There was no way that Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi lost to the Sith apprentice, right? "Master, what's wrong?" Izuku asked, worriedly. "Fine, I am, Qui-Gon Jinn. Though, is not," Yoda said, as he looked to Dooku. "What happened to Master Jin?" Dooku questioned. "The Sith apprentice managed to deal a fatal blow, he did." "Did not make it, Master Jin did," Yoda said, as Dooku soon became covered in a sad aura. "This surely shows that the Sith have returned, right, Master?" Dooku asked, as Yoda nodded. "Returned, the Sith have. Prepare for their plans, we must," Yoda stated as he looked at the exhausted Izuku. "Return to your quarters, you must, Izuku. Continue speaking to Dooku." "I will," Yoda said, as Izuku left the room. As Izuku left the room, he sat outside the room as he wanted to listen in on the conversation between the two masters. He didn't want to intrude on their conversation, but he was curious about how this conversation would go. Would Master Dooku place the fault on Master Yoda? Or would he turn to something darker in order to vent out his frustrations? That was what was on his mind. "Master Qui-Gon told me about the boy. Train him, he wanted you to do," Yoda said, as Dooku shook his head. "Because of his death, the Jedi Order has shown that they cannot take on the Sith alone. And it was because you all ignored the clear signs that the Sith were making moves in the background that I wish to leave the Jedi Order," Dooku explained as Yoda nodded. "Stop you, I won't. May the Force be with you," Yoda said, as Dooku nodded. As Izuku heard the steps coming towards him, he immediately took that as time to leave as he runs off back to his room. Once he was inside of it, we return back to Master Yoda as he goes off to talk to Chancellor Palpatine to inform him about how one of the Jedi had lost their own against a Sith apprentice. As the two talked, Palpatine decided that since his apprentice had died, it was time to start the war between the Republic and the Sith government. And as the old master walked out of his room, pulling up a communicator, he called his new apprentice. "Did you hear the words of Master Yoda?" he asked. "Yes, I have, my new master," a familiar voice called back. "Begin the Clone War program," Palpatine said, ominously. "It will be done, my master," the familiar voice said, turning off the communicator on their side. As Palpatine sat in his office, he started to cackle like nothing ever before as he found that his plans were going according to how he predicted. Master Yoda's own retiring from Grandmaster was something that he couldn't ever predict, But it is all now part of the plan. He couldn't wait to turn the Jedi into an extinct religion as he thought about how he would revive the Sith Order. Months passed as Izuku was left to train under Master Yoda. The boy was learning many things whilst under the tutelage of the former Grand Master of the Order. He had learned many Force techniques that could save lives as well as help others learn how to wield the Force to better strengths. He had also learned how to speak in many tongues, since Yoda needed to learn that in the past so that he could understand whatever many other races stated. He forced this kind of learning onto Izuku so that the young boy could use it to his advantage on Earth, since in the future he would use a native tongue from another planet to cover whatever plans he was holding. Izuku and Yoda were currently inside the training facility on Coruscant as they were using training blades. Izuku was using skillful strikes filled with power and grace as he combined Makashi, Soresu and Vapad in order to make his style incapable of being penetrated. Even Mace Windu had come by a few times over the last few months to teach Izuku how to use the form to its utmost potential without falling to the dark side of the Force. But as Izuku and Yoda were using their moves against one another, they were interrupted when Master Kenobi had entered the room. "Master Yoda, I request your presence in the archives," Kenobi said, urgently. "Come with you, I will. Young Midoriya, training is postponed for now," Yoda stated, allowing Izuku to rest for a while. "So, what is it you need?" Yoda asked, as Kenobi began talking as they walked. "I had received information about Count Dooku of Sorrento being the head of a separatist faction wanting to split apart from the Senate. I was hand-given information from the Chancellor himself. His sources are very tight and real," Kenobi said, as Yoda stroked his chin. "Go there, you must. Learn everything you can, you should," Yoda stated with a clap of his cane on the ground. "I will do what I must, Master," Kenobi said, as he walked away. "May the Force be with you," Yoda said, as Kenobi smiled. "May the Force be with you," Kenobi stated with a bow before leaving. As Yoda watched the student of the late Qui-Gon Jinn rush off on his mission to find out what was happening, he turned to walk back into the training room. Once he arrived, he found Izuku somehow in a position that was very confusing, as the boy had somehow turned himself into a human pretzel. "Much work we have on the Force. We do," Yoda thought to himself with a chuckle. As Kenobi was off on his mission, Izuku and Master Yoda were training once more inside the training facility within the Jedi Temple. The two were ironing out the boy's mishaps with the whole footing issue he'd experienced whenever combining Makashi, Soresu and Vapad into one whole fighting style. It was during this time frame that Izuku had learned a new fighting style, and it was many times more aggressive than Vapad. It was called Shicho, and it allowed for more power to be utilized in his patterns of attack, and he quickly attempted to combine its powerful and aggressive strikes with his impeccable defense and power absorption of Vapad. From here on out, Izuku found that he loved how the aggressive form of fighting completely fixed his footing problems that Vapad had given him. And with that, he decided to keep Vapad out of his fighting styles unless he wanted to change it up and use Vapad alone. And for the remaining time he was training with Master Yoda, the two were making sure that Izuku's footwork as well as his forms were perfect. It wasn't until later that afternoon that the two received news about Master Obi-Wan Kenobi being captured by Count Dooku on Geonosis. Once finding out that Master Kenobi was captured on that specific planet, Yoda looked to Izuku in order to gauge his experience in battle. Since he could keep up with Yoda of all Jedi Masters, the old former Grand Master allowed him to come with him to Geonosis. Rushing over to a ship to take off to another planet with reinforcements, the two took off away from Coruscant. When asking Yoda about why they were heading to a planet near Coruscant, as well as outside of the Republic's central influence, Yoda had told him one thing. The Republic hands on everything they have. Clones being made, on another planet we have. Use them for war, Chancellor Palpatine does, Yoda stated, as Izuku became more confused. "How do you know about that? I've never heard you talk to the other masters about that kind of thing," Izuku questioned, as Yoda stroked his chin. "Had many talks with Chancellor Palpatine, I have." "Brought up the clones, he did," Yoda said, patting Izuku's head. "Okay, I guess that makes sense. But where are we going after finding these clones?" Izuku asked, as Yoda smiled. "To Kamino we must, to collect the reinforcements. Then after collecting them, to Geonosis we must go," Yoda said, as Izuku tilted his head. "Master Kenobi, on that planet, he is," Yoda explained as Izuku nodded. Over the next few hours, both Izuku and Yoda moved around the facilities at the planet of Kamino. It was a very beautiful planet in terms of how it looked from a space perspective, although from the inside it was covered completely in water. And the Kaminoans were only able to survive the great flooding of said planet by building their new home high above the watery depths below. The two traversed the place as Yoda questioned Lama Su, who was the leader of the planet of Kaminoans. They talked about what the clones were created for, and how they were to be used. But there was something Izuku thought about whilst he listened to their conversation. Mr. Lama Su. What makes the clones just that, clones? Izuku asked, his curious mind being shown. Ah, young Padawan Midoriya. I'm sorry for ignoring your presence, but the clone's presence for being created was called for by Master Sifo-Dyas. He found out that a war was brewing to the surface between the Separatists and the Republic, so he ordered an army for the Republic. Lama Su stated as Izuku shook his head. Is there something that will allow the clones to be controlled by someone who is in power though? Izuku asked, as Yoda looked at his Padawan. Why are you asking this, Padawan Midoriya? Yoda questioned with some slight confusion. It just doesn't make sense. Why make an army when you can use the people of the Republic? Izuku said, as Yoda stroked his chin. That was a fine question, wasn't it? Looking to Lama Su, he wanted to hear what the leader of Kamino would tell his Padawan. Lama Su, by the way, didn't like how curious Izuku was being with their cloning project, but he decided that since he was only around 4 to 8 years of age that he'd forget about it later on in his life. And he began to tell them about how they are taking the blood of known Mandalorian Jango Fett in order to create the basis of the clone army. They will have rapid aging by the time they reach the tender age of around 5 years of age, before they will die of natural causes or on the battlefield. Something else at play here, is there? Yoda inquired. Not in the way you think, Master Yoda. We had been given something to make sure that the clones never turn on their Jedi generals should you all enter the war with the Separatists. Lama Su stated as Yoda stared at them. Why are you stating the Jedi are going to be generals? We are supposed to stay neutral in any kind of thing that happens between the Republic and any outside nations. Izuku said, as he remembered something about neutral countries from his home world. So the Jedi will not be taking part in this war? Lama Su questioned, confused. That remains to be seen, however. I believe off track we have gotten. When can the clones come with us, at the soonest? Yoda questioned. We have 200,000 troops ready at the go, and at least 2 million being prepared for another day. Lama Su said, as Yoda nodded. I will take them with my Padawan. Go we must. To save Master Kenobi from Geonosis we will. Yoda stated, as he softly pulled Izuku away. As the leader of Kamino watched the two walk away, he made sure to call Chancellor Palpatine so that they could get information on Izuku. A boy as inquiring as him should not be left alive for very long, as he would catch on to the plot that was out for the Jedi within the home turf of said Jedi. As the two Jedi got onto their ship, they led the 200,000 clones through space as they made their way to the planet of Geonosis. They broke through the atmosphere as they came near to crashing on the rocky planet's surface. They managed to keep their ships steady as they flew towards where the massive arena was that Master Kenobi would be executed. Although there was something off about the place as there was blaster fire coming from the place as Yoda and Izuku found that the place was in complete chaos. They announced their arrival when the clones began to fire upon the droids that were battling the Jedi Order as they were fighting within the arena itself. Master Kenobi and his Padawan had managed to run off during the whole battle and were found about 15 minutes later. They were both fighting Count Dooku, who had revealed that he had become a Lord of the Sith. Izuku was so taken aback by this information that he dropped his lightsaber and stared at Dooku in shock. Yoda entered the room not too long after as Dooku was seen staring at both master and apprentice within 2 different orders. So, become the Sith you have. Disappointed I am, Yoda said, softly. The Jedi Order has become corrupt, just like the Senate that you all serve. Dooku said, as he prepared his lightsaber. Is there some other way to stop this whole thing though? Izuku asked, stuttering as he gained Dooku's attention. What would that be then, Padawan? Dooku questioned as he lowered his blade. Isn't there some kind of way to not go into war? You are putting a lot of innocent lives at risk declaring war. Izuku said, as Dooku stared at Izuku. You are far more informed about the way of life than I expected you to. Tell me, What happened on your home planet that caused you to be so far against the idea of it? Dooku questioned. Because the innocent is dragged into it. Some people are just wishing to just be left alone, whilst a war will bring everyone into it. On my home planet, there was this country called America. They stayed out of my home world's Second World War. They had stayed out of it for so long because of the fact that they didn't want to get involved with something that didn't involve them. But as soon as a part of their country was attacked, you want to know what they did? Izuku explained before questioning Dooku. What was it they did? Dooku asked, not liking the boy's tone. They made 2 massive bombs that could do untold amounts of damage to infrastructure, as well as life itself. They called it an atomic bomb. What do you think a weapon like that could do? Izuku stated. I could only imagine what it could do, but it pales in comparison to the Force and its very own abilities. Dooku said, as Izuku spoke up again. An atomic bomb can destroy matter within seconds, cause a radiation poisoning to those who were inside its blast radius and weren't able to escape the full blast. But 2 whole cities from the world I came from, the country I called home, were destroyed by only 2 of these bombs. Imagine what millions of them could do to an entire planet of life. Izuku said, as Dooku thought about it. The idea that atomic bombs created by this boy's home planet could hold such devastation. It brought him to worry. Should this planet learn interplanetary travel, it would be disastrous for those in the known galaxy. They may have laser weapons, but that doesn't do a thing against something that can tear you apart from the atomic level. But there was something off about the way Izuku had told him this information because the boy was shaking like a leaf. So steeling himself to ask the question, he spoke. What would happen to that planet filled of life? Dooku questioned. The planet would lose the ability to support life, because all of the radiation would make it impossible to survive. Nothing would survive, not even the planet itself, Izuku said, as Dooku stood stunned. That is impossible. There's no way a weapon like that could cause such harm. But what is the meaning of this explanation by telling me this? Dooku said, after calming himself. War brings about more war. What happens when this war is over? What if the Chancellor decides to change everything to something that fits himself as the ruler? What if he creates a weapon of mass destruction that could cause untold amounts of death and destruction to innocent lives? What would you say to that? Izuku asked. I would merely make sure that he couldn't survive the night. But that still doesn't answer me, boy, Dooku said, as Izuku ignited his blade as Dooku raised his own. There is something about war that was written down on my planet. Those who die in war are forgotten for the rest of history, but it is the victors of war that can write that particular history down in the way they view it. Izuku said, as when he and Yoda attacked Dooku, the clones outside were beginning their fight with the droids. The Clone Wars had officially begun. Almost immediately the trio attacked one another as they threw themselves into battle. Izuku thrusted his blade at wide arcing angles whilst Yoda jumped at different directions to land a glancing blow to Dooku, who had been countering each strike with his graceful swings of his blade using Makashi's duelist fighting style. Izuku sent a kick Dooku's way as he barely dodged the attack before being launched with a force push from Yoda. As the man landed on his feet, he put his saber away before launching Sith lightning at the 2 who blocked the attack. Although Izuku had much more issues in holding it back, Yoda showed his true strength as he held the Sith lightning in his single palm. And almost as fast as that was shown, the old master had ended the attack by clapping his hands, creating a small gust of wind, stopping the Sith lightning in its entirety. Izuku used this chance to attack Dooku as he swung at a side angle, forcing the man to jump in a different direction. Yoda attacked where the man was about to land as he pulled his saber to his hand and blocked the strike. Izuku leapt over for another attack that was a mix of Vapad as well as Soresu, but was force pushed away by Dooku. On the ground nearby, Anakin Skywalker watched in awe as the former Grand Master and his Padawan took on Dooku. Izuku was not even half of the young man's age, and he was doing far better than he was. Although that could be attributed to Yoda's presence on the battlefield as they clashed blades with the older gentleman. With Izuku attacking from unpredictable angles, and Yoda using his guidance as well as age to guide him through the force and land strikes that dealt heavy damage, Dooku immediately used force push on the 2, sending them backwards onto their backs as he retreated to his ship and prepared to escape. But almost as soon as he closed the door to his ship, he felt a massive pain in his hip before looking down to see a purple lightsaber hilt poking through his body. Feeling it pulled back through his body, he turned around to find Izuku standing there next to Yoda with a determined expression covering his face. "We shall meet again, young Midoriya. The same goes for you as well, Anakin Skywalker," Dooku said, as he took off in his ship. "We need to go after him," Anakin called out, as Izuku rushed to him. "We can't. We need to get the Jedi Masters out of here and escape back to Coruscant. I know that you want to fight, but we came here to save both you and your master. We need to go," Izuku said, as Anakin let out a silent growl before nodding. "Protect the Senator we must." "Go. Catch up I will," Yoda said, as he looked to the unconscious Obi-Wan. Hours after the battle between the Jedi and Count Dooku, the four had found themselves in hyperspace as Yoda looked at the Master Knight duo. They had been walking around the Jedi Temple after they had lost track of Count Dooku when he had left Geonosis. And because of the fight itself, Izuku and Anakin themselves were keeping themselves in training both the blade and their force abilities. For a major portion of their time within the Jedi Temple they were not paying much attention to the battles within space or on other planets within the Outer Rim. But for Izuku his training consisted of him learning how to utilize the Force like Master Yoda had shown in great abundance in the fight with Dooku. Izuku had wanted to learn how to counter Force lightning like his master did so that he could counter any Sith Lord he ever came across in the future. He had been studying through the Jedi archives, at least what he could read from them since he couldn't access the restricted section without being a Jedi Master. As he learned new Force abilities from the Jedi archives, he had found two certain moves that in his opinion, should have been in the restricted section. Force Tutaminous, an ability that could absorb and redirect any kind of attack thrown at its user and push them back towards their owner. Such as blaster bolts, if the Jedi is strong enough to use it effectively this move could become very powerful in the right hands. And the second ability was Force Awareness. This ability allowed any Jedi or Sith based on the archived information to sense events from the past or future that could have a chance of happening. This can also allow the user to feel a disturbance within the Force as a whole, such as someone being in danger or something odd appearing within the Force and using it to their advantage. Once hearing about these two abilities, Izuku focused more on awareness than he did Tutaminous because he wanted to learn more about his surroundings. He had learned that if one was intimately close with the Force, they could learn how to use Force Awareness in order to sense the inner workings of the Force. Not to mention the fact that they could feel the disturbances within it much easier and can predict what can happen should a certain event happen. So he focused his training on learning how to utilize Force Awareness to its fullest potential as he stayed on Coruscant. Over the next few months, he stopped training in physical combat with Yoda and focused his time on learning more about the Force instead. It was something that Yoda was concerned about, but decided was better to allow Izuku to focus on. He was a former Grand Master, and he would rather have a student who was more attuned to the Force than actual combat. If his newest apprentice could learn more about the Force than his previous ones, then this could mean that Izuku might learn how to utilize the skills he had once used in the past. It was during one of their physical training sessions that Izuku was seen struggling to use a Force ability that Yoda had recognized. But before he could get Izuku to stop, he was suddenly attacked by yellow lightning that he immediately caught with his palm and redirected into the walls around them. Yoda was deeply concerned as to how Izuku learned this ability but noticed that Izuku's facial features were not something that were liking this move at all. He seemed to be disappointed in himself as soon as this ability came out of his body at all, although, he seemed to want to learn this move entirely. "What move, use was you trying?" Yoda inquired. "I wanted to see if I could learn Force Awareness. But it appears that I used a different one instead," Izuku said, with a sigh as he sat down. "Force Awareness, I thought that was in the restricted section," Yoda said, as he looked at his Padawan in concern. "No. I found it within the Jedi archives that I could look at. I was surprised that it wasn't with the restricted Jedi abilities, but as soon as I saw what it could do, I wanted to be more attuned to the inner machinations of the Force," Izuku said, as Yoda looked into his eyes. They still remained their emerald color as Yoda let out a small sigh of relief. His Padawan was not going through the path to power, just wanting to learn a new ability that could make him stronger to defend others. He was still pure and held pure intentions with the ability he was attempting to use against his master. Although the fact that he learned Force Judgment was worrying for Yoda, if Izuku learned how to use Force Judgment on accident, that meant that he might come across a Sith ability completely unaware. Letting out a small breath, the old master pulled him with himself as they traveled to the archives. He wanted to see where Izuku had gotten the information of force awareness from so that it could be moved into the restricted section once more. For the rest of the day the two were placing different archived information in different sections of the archives of the Jedi Temple. However, Izuku came across something that gave him pause for mostly confusion as well as concern that was written on his face. As Yoda looked at some archives, he spoke with Jocasta Nu in order to get some of the information placed in the correct spots as Izuku opened a certain archive. It was here that he found some revealing information about the Jedi as a whole as he looked at its information. The Jedi Order has been around for 25,000 years. We haven't ever come across a Sith Lord during that time that had managed to challenge our reign. Although we haven't met a Sith Lord in the last 1,000 years, we must never get complacent. The Sith are rats that like to hide within the shadows. This force ability we have used in the past has been known to turn those who seek strength to fall to the dark side. One must never use it unless they feel it's necessary to their cause. This ability is called Force Future. It allows one to look far into the future of one's timeline of events before you will be given information about how it's supposed to end. The Jedi Order was always meant to be living life to the fullest and protecting the people. Should they be compromised in terms of their protections, such as protecting the people with power, they should be set on the path towards salvation. If that cannot happen and the Sith rise to power, they should die off until a new order can be remade. Once closing the archive tablet, Izuku looked at Master Yoda as the small alien was making his way over to him. Izuku placed the archive itself back on the wall as he hadn't managed to read the entire thing as Yoda inquired about the archive he'd read. Izuku told him about the fact that it was just talking about how the Jedi Order was around for tens of thousands of years and had no information about horrible force abilities he could learn. Knowing his Padawan wasn't lying, Yoda went on with his search within the archives as he searched for any archives that shouldn't be outside the restricted section. Izuku, however, stared at Yoda's disappearing form within the room. He let out a sigh of sadness as he knew that the Jedi Order has long since forgotten their role in the galaxy as a whole. But he came to one final conclusion before catching up with Master Yoda in the archives. If the Jedi Order were to ever fall, I need to escape to form a new order. One that wouldn't fall back on the problems this one fell through. It's as the saying goes. Before creation comes destruction. Izuku thought to himself before catching up with his master. Izuku moved throughout the Jedi Temple. He had been long since knighted into the order. As of right now, he was a Jedi Knight, which was very concerning for his peers since nobody has ever become a Jedi Knight at his age. Izuku at this point in time was only around 10 years old, and he was already a Jedi Knight. Sure, he was happy to be a Jedi Knight, but he felt as though he gained the title too soon. He felt a disturbance in the Force. The entirety of Coruscant was covered in a darkness that he knew was not natural. Something evil was taking place on the planet. He just didn't know where it was coming from and how to prevent it from happening. He had been on many battles next to his master, but most of them were battles won through wits alone. But it was during those battles that Izuku gained the experience that he needed to become a powerful warrior. Yoda chose him to become a Jedi Knight because he saw that the boy was ready to become one, even at his young age. Izuku, however, spent his time on Coruscant with his title as he looked at the archives searching for a new power to attempt to learn. He had learned Force Heal a while back and was learning how to utilize its power much faster than he learned under Master Yoda. He was happy with himself as he looked for Force Future, an ability granted to Jedi who wanted to see what the future had in store for their order. As the boy was reading about the ability within the archives, he felt a presence moving towards him from the restricted section. It was an elderly woman who smiled at him as she walked through the archives towards his location. Putting the file down, Izuku looked in her direction as he smiled at her, to which she reciprocated back at him. "What brings you back into the archives, young one?" she asked. "Master Jocasta, it's been a while," Izuku said, as Jocasta smiled. "Yes, it has. Now answer the question," she said, rubbing the boy's head. "I was trying to learn a new Force ability, something that most Jedi had done in the High Republic era," Izuku said, showing the woman the ability he was researching. "Ah, Force Future. That is something that no Jedi has learned in ages. Are you sure you're up to the challenge to learn it?" she asked, a happy tone under her speech. "Yeah, I wanted to at least have something up my sleeve when I go out into the galaxy when I eventually leave the Jedi Temple," Izuku said, as he smiled down at the table. "How about I help you learn this ability?" Jocasta asked, as Izuku nodded. The Clone Wars had lasted for 3 long, grueling years. Master Yoda was having nightmares about the current Jedi Order slowly, but surely dying out within this galaxy. But he felt happy all the same, because he could see his Padawan moving on to planet Earth in order to create a new order of Jedi. But that was beside the point. Master Yoda was growing tired of this war, and he wanted it to end right now, that way he wouldn't have to worry about anything else anymore. He had lived for over 900 years, and he was starting to become tired of this 3-year-long war. Palpatine had done nothing but extend it as long as he could, and the old master could easily see the man was just vying for more power. The more power he'd gain within the Republic, the more a bad feeling about the man came over him. He knew that the man was connected to the dark side of the Force, but the way he was connected to it always eluded to even him. The Jedi had become so powerful since the High Republic era, something that had caused the old Grand Master great pain. He had lost his master during that time and didn't wish for it to happen to his Padawan as well. So he decided to make a move towards Palpatine's quarters in order to demand that he stop this war immediately. This war had gone on for far too long, and the fact that he wasn't accepting any kind of treaties for peace, it was concerning to say the least. So here he was, making his way towards the Chancellor's office as he prepared to tell the man to drop his emergency powers. The war was going to be long over, that much was given. Count Dooku had been killed by Skywalker about a few days before. When the Invisible Hand had arrived and kidnapped the Chancellor, and Grievous was going to be found on another planet very soon. So, as he got into his speeder, he came across Izuku learning in the middle of the training area with Jocasta new as she taught him the ways of the Force. Yoda smiled to himself as he steeled his resolve to finish this war right here and now. He couldn't wait to get back to training his Padawan. As Yoda's speeder took off towards the executive building, Izuku took notice of it before moving back into his training under Jocasta Nu. He was in the middle of trying to learn a new Force ability and he wouldn't be distracted by anything that came across him. That was until something in the Force caused him to stumble within his meditation within the training facility. He was bombarded with too much information at once as he fell into a deep sleep for that day as a vision came upon him. Izuku walked through a massive expanse of darkness. Everything around him then lit up as fires were everywhere. Izuku looked in all directions as he found clone troopers killing many Jedi Masters and Knights, even younglings they had come across. Leading the group of them through the halls of the Jedi Temple was someone bathed in darkness. He had yellow eyes, but he held a lightsaber that Izuku was familiar with but couldn't put his mind on whose it belonged to. He followed the man around the place, wondering what he was doing slaughtering the Jedi Order. He had a blue blade, but many other Jedi Knights and Padawans plus younglings had blue lightsabers. But the way the young man was using his blade, it was a form of Shicho, a very aggressive form of fighting that caught Izuku's breath in his throat. He watched as the door to where the younglings were located was forced open, and he could see the children's looks as they ran up to the man. And that was when he heard the boy call out to the man. His name was covered in darkness, not being revealed to him so that he could figure it out on his own. But the way the boy's lips moved, Izuku realized that he was talking to Anakin Skywalker, but that couldn't be right. He was supposedly the chosen one, the one who would bring balance to the Force, not leave it in darkness. He didn't have enough time to react as the young man ignited his blade and slaughtered the children immediately. Without remorse, the young man turned to him now, as he thrusted his blade towards him. Izuku screamed in massive fear. Izuku crawled over to the wall as he hugged his arms to his legs and pulled them into his chest as he tried to gain some breath back. That was the first time he had received a vision of sorts, that was based on the future. And it really hurt. The simple fact that Anakin Skywalker had killed younglings was very concerning, but he had to make a plan for that specific future. If he was seeing something akin to this so soon near the end of the war, the end of the Jedi Order as he saw it was coming. Rushing over to a compartment holding his belongings, Izuku gathered them and rushed towards his speeder that he'd gotten as a present from Master Yoda. He placed his belongings inside as he prepared to have it set up for him to escape Coruscant when the time came for him to run away. Shaking his head, he couldn't let the feelings of losing most of the Jedi Order get to him. It was only a dream. Nothing of the sort could happen that quickly, right? He was taken out of his hysterical musing as Jocasta Nu rushed into his bedroom, that he just returned to after hearing his scream. "Midoriya, are you all right?" she asked, kneeling to his height. I had a vision," Izuku said, as Jocasta cursed herself internally. "Come with me, we can discuss this vision inside the archives," she stated before walking ahead of him. Izuku followed after. They moved throughout the entire temple as the day soon became night. Sitting down within the Jedi archives, the two were drinking some tea that always calmed the boy down after something harrowing. As they sat in silence, Izuku began to talk about the nightmarish vision that he'd seen. He talked about the horrors of the clone troopers entering the Jedi Temple and committing genocide on the Order, killing masters, knights, Padawans and even younglings alike. He talked about who was leading them into the temple as well, his face and name forgotten at this point in time. But the fact that his Force abilities were similar to Anakin Skywalker was not lost on the two of them. Once Izuku finished his story, Jocasta knew that there was something odd about the Force. For it to inform Izuku about something very bad happening so soon, it meant that the Sith were going to make their move. And it would be to bring the Chosen One to their side and destroy the Jedi Order as a whole. She got up and rushed into the restricted section of the archives as Izuku sat at the table thinking, and she started to collect the old archives to send them all away. She thought about it for a second, but she had noticed that Izuku was looking somewhat distant with the other Masters and Jedi as a whole. And she entered the room with some of the restricted information on the Jedi Order's past. "Izuku, are you planning on leaving the Jedi Order anytime soon?" Jocasta asked. "No, why?" Izuku asked, confused. "Well, I noticed that you packed your things in your room. Is there a reason for you doing that?" Jocasta questioned. "The vision that I saw was only in a matter of days. Maybe hours alone, but we need to leave and fast. The Jedi Order is going to fall at some point this week and I want to survive it as best I can," Izuku said, as Jocasta nodded her head. "Well then, I leave these archives in your capable hands," she said, handing over 2 pieces of Jedi holocrons. "What are they?" Izuku asked, holding one of them. "These are holocrons. They allow a Jedi to record anything they know about the Force and have them be taught to other Force users that come down the line, even long after your death," Jocasta said, as Izuku nodded. "Won't you need them?" Izuku asked, as the old woman shook her head. "No, I will be taking most of the archive somewhere else. I want you to take most of the restricted section away from Coruscant, and out of the prying hands of those who wish for power," Jocasta stated. And with that their plan was started. Yoda had returned back to the temple with grave news regarding the Chancellor. He told the council about how the man wouldn't be giving up his emergency powers just because he was demanding of it. He even made a comment about him being afraid of the Chancellor gaining more powers within Coruscant. But, with that attempt out of the water, Yoda decided to just head to Kashyyyk so that he could assist the Wookiees in defeating the Separatists. With Izuku, he had collected as much of the restricted section's archived information and hidden them in a secret compartment within his starfighter. He knew that he wouldn't be capable of taking all of them, but he just needed to have enough information about how to start up a new order should he be the last Jedi remaining of the Order. And as the day went on, he overheard from Master Windu and Master Kenobi about Anakin Skywalker's mission to spy on Chancellor Palpatine. So Izuku decided to stay in Anakin's shadow and hide his presence from the young man, knowing what he'd be doing in the future. For the next few days, Izuku would follow after Anakin and watch from afar as the young man was further manipulated into the dark side by Palpatine. Izuku had no idea why Palpatine knew about the dark side of the Force, but that was a major red flag as he made sure to contact Master Windu about this. When he called the man, he questioned why Izuku was following Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker. But Izuku told him that he felt something off about the Chancellor, ignoring the man's question, something that Master Windu immediately jumped on. "What do you mean you feel something off about Chancellor Palpatine?" Windu questioned. "He knows things about the dark side of the Force. Doesn't that scream something bad?" Izuku asked. "What about it?" We talked to him about Sith Lords before, and he was incredibly silent during them. Windu stated. Master Windu, he talked about a Dark Lord of the Sith. Something that he shouldn't have ever heard of. Izuku said, as Windu sighed. Who was this Dark Lord of the Sith he referred to? He questioned, sounding exasperated. He talked about a tragedy. About Darth Plagueis the Wise. Izuku said, as Master Windu hummed. Darth Plagueis, I've never heard of a Sith Lord with that name. Windu stated, as he thought about it. Shouldn't Palpatine not know what a Sith Lord even is? Or what they can even do? Izuku asked, as Windu gained a look of acknowledgement. Thank you for your information, Jedi Knight Midoriya, we will look into this immediately. Master Windu stated before he cut off the communicator. Over the next couple of days, Izuku prepared himself for the worst. And he was losing sleep on this as he never heard back from Master Windu from his call a couple of days prior ago. He was rushing through the building, when he came across Jedi Knight Skywalker rushing towards the docking bay. Climbing into the young man's speeder, he watched as Skywalker rushed off towards the main executive building. A very dark expression taking over his facial features. Arriving at the executive building, Izuku followed after Anakin as they finally arrived within the Chancellor's office. Izuku stayed outside of it as he watched what happened from outside the room. He watched as Anakin walked into the room as Palpatine had looked at Anakin with something akin to hope. Talking about as though the Jedi were planning on taking over the Republic through force by killing him. Izuku couldn't hear what Windu said, but it was not something that Anakin liked as the young man swung his blade upwards slicing through the man's arm. Moments later, Palpatine had then launched lightning at the Jedi Master causing him to convulse and be tossed from the window. Palpatine was not like he was before, he was now wrinkled and very old looking, but he moved towards Anakin as he spoke with grandeur. Good, very good, I can be the one to save the ones you love, so long as you join me, Palpatine said, in a very sinister voice. I just want to save Padme, Anakin muttered, as he knelt in front of Palpatine. From henceforth, you shall be called Darth Vader, and your first mission, lead an army on the Jedi Temple, and burn it to the ground. Leave no survivors, Palpatine said, as Anakin immediately left. Izuku watched on as Palpatine just let out a massive sigh before walking over to his communicator. He picked it up before Izuku stayed near the door listening to the Chancellor's words. Captain Cody, this is Chancellor Palpatine. The Chancellor stated. What is it, my lord? He asked. Execute Order 66, he stated. Almost immediately, Izuku felt as though thousands of souls were lost in an instant. He then felt Palpatine showing his true nature as he turned towards the young man hiding in a small closet. He then spoke out loud for him to hear as the man walked towards the small locker he was hiding inside of. I know you are hiding in there, little one. Come out so that I can end your pitiful existence before you even warn the Jedi. Palpatine said, as he forced the locker open. Unfortunately for him, Izuku had already made a hole underneath him as he used that to escape towards the Jedi Temple. He needed to inform Master Jocasta about this revelation, as well as how Master Windu died. Izuku rushed through the Coruscant streets as he felt more and more Jedi across the galaxy lose their lives to the clones who were supposed to be allies. He felt a rush of tears falling down his cheeks as he cried out in anguish before he found the Jedi Temple. He had to inform them about the people coming to attack it, and as he rushed towards the front doors of it, he found the place being surrounded by millions of clones on all sides, and immediately knew that he needed to save as many people as possible. Rushing through the doors, he found himself searching the entire building for Master Jocasta knew and found her in the archives. She turned as she saw him rushing towards her, and managed a smile as she watched him. Jocasta, we need to leave now. Izuku called out, causing the old woman to look alarmed. What's wrong? She questioned. Chancellor Palpatine is the Dark Lord of the Sith. He's executed Order 66 on the clones. We need to get out of here, Izuku said, as Jocasta nodded her head. Attempt to help Kalaran Beck in evacuating the younglings, Jocasta said, as Izuku nodded. Rushing away and out of the archives, Izuku found himself actually running into the older Jedi as he was escorting the younglings he could get out of the temple. The man saw Izuku and immediately told him to lead them to the starfighters within the docking bay of the temple. With that said and done, Izuku led the younglings to the starfighter docking bay. And as they moved throughout the building, they watched as the temple guards were fighting off the clones as well as the person wearing a cloak. Izuku immediately knew the person was Anakin based on the aura the young man was releasing inside the place. The younglings and Izuku finally arrived at the starfighter docking bay as Izuku helped them inside and strapped them inside of it. He left the ship as he found Kelleran rushing towards him, and as soon as he attempted to help him inside of the ship, Izuku shook his head. When Kelleran gave him a questioning look, Izuku pointed at one of the training rooms of the building. And the man nodded at him as he got onto the ship preparing to head out into space. Izuku ran through the halls of the temple as he found the youngling chamber that he had pointed at whilst inside the docking bay. He was horrified when he saw the devastation inside the room. Children were dead on the ground. And some of them had the look of pure fear on their faces as their heads were on the ground, decapitation. Izuku left the chamber with a forlorn expression as he felt tears fall from his eyes once again. He just couldn't understand why the Chosen One would allow himself to fall to the dark side, but that was when he remembered the young man's words. "I want to save Padme." Anakin's vulnerable voice rasped. Izuku cursed himself internally. Padme Amidala had been pregnant for the last few months, and nobody had realized it. She was holding the unborn child between the two of them. As he rushed through the temple attempting to find anyone who was still alive, he came across Anakin, who was standing still. It was as though he was absorbing all the souls of the dead within the building when he turned around. As if he was sensing Izuku's presence behind him as he glared down at the green-haired boy, pulling out his lightsaber, Izuku stepped away from him. Anakin ignited his lightsaber as he slowly stepped toward him with murder on his mind when Izuku spoke. "Anakin, is this really the path you want to go through?" Izuku called out, as the young man glared at him harder. It's not too late to switch sides. The dark side takes from people, never gives," Izuku said, as Anakin spoke. "You will not get in the way of my mission to save Padme," Anakin said, rushing Izuku. Igniting his own blade, Izuku entered Sorasu's defensive style as Anakin wailed down on Izuku. The boy had been struggling from the get-go about how the Chosen One could kill everyone inside the temple, even younglings. He dodged a swipe at his head with a bend of his spine backwards before he kicked Anakin in the chin back as he did a backflip as he took a few breaths. Anakin's strength was not something to shrug off. He had a cybernetic hand that could increase his core strength as well as power. It was maddening. The two stood off against one another before Anakin went for an attack at Izuku's left. Blocking the strike, Izuku used his mixed fighting style in order to defend himself. "I've already read through your movements. You use a similar style to Master Yoda, and I will kill you," Anakin said, as he swung his blade down on Izuku's. "NGH. Anakin, this is wrong. Why would you kill everything for this?" "This is not the path that you are supposed to take," Izuku said, as he was punched in the face. "Lies. All the Jedi have done for me was cause me anguish and problems. In my eyes the Jedi are the evil ones, not the Sith," Anakin called out, as Izuku dodged another kick. "Anakin, please listen. You are supposed to be the Chosen One, created by the Force to stop the Sith. You were supposed to destroy the Sith, not join them," Izuku screamed out as he felt Anakin lift him with the Force and choke him. "I have had enough of your words. Now are we going to fight to the death, or are you going to continue this farce?" Anakin growled. Izuku shook his head as he used the Force to cause one of the pillars of the temple to fall towards Anakin. As the young man had turned his focus over to the pillar, Izuku was dropped, and he rushed towards the docking bay. He really needed to get to his starfighter and escape Coruscant. It was no longer safe on the planet as it was completely covered in darkness. He did sense the power of Yoda returning from Kashyyyk as he walked through the halls of the temple but didn't rush over to him. He arrived within the docking bay of the temple and found the ship that Kelleran Beck was manning take off into the sky and disappear into the dark sky. Izuku made it to his starfighter as he climbed inside of it and started it up. He needed to escape from Coruscant in order to make it to a new area of the galaxy, his homeworld Earth. It was a completely safe planet from the Empire that the Sith were creating, and it wasn't on any kind of mapping that the Jedi created in the past. As Izuku took off into the sky, he heard the sounds of another starfighter blasting after him from the temple. Looking at the rearview mirror he placed on his starfighter, he saw Anakin's starfighter flying quickly after him. Izuku put in the coordinates for planet Earth within the Outer Rim planets as he quickly left for hyperspace. Whilst he was doing that, Anakin made his mission to follow Izuku and make sure he dies. And soon they arrived over the planet of Earth within the Outer Rim, and for a moment Anakin was surprised by the beauty of it before he shook himself back into his fury. He began to start shooting his laser weapons on his ship at Izuku as the smaller craft started to take damage. He watched as it fell from space and into the atmosphere of the planet as he slowly followed after it. Wondering if the boy had died within the ship itself as it fell towards the small planet. As he landed his ship nearby a trash-filled beach, he walked over to where he could vaguely sense the boy he was attempting to kill. Lifting some of the trash out of the way, he found the ship as it was ripped to hell and back and was having issues staying on. He looked at the astromech that was looking over the damage of the ship before using his lightsaber to kill it. Using his lightsaber again to break through the ship's hull, he pulled the top off as he searched for Izuku inside. He searched for the boy for a while before he felt the boy's power within the Force disappear, as though he had died in the crash somewhere else. Feeling a surge of power from the death of such a student of Yoda, he smiled to himself as he walked back to his ship. Climbing inside of the ship and taking off, he was in hyperspace by the time Izuku climbed out of the trash beach. The boy looked around as he felt his mind slowly feel foggy and filled with utter sadness, but that didn't stop him from moving towards a familiar park in the distance where a small explosion had been heard. Back on Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine had just managed to reorganize the Senate and transform it into the Second Galactic Empire. He noticed a faint signature on a faraway part of the galaxy that he had no idea came from, but he knew for a fact that it was the student of the former Grand Master of the Jedi Order. He smiled to himself as he thought about making the former Grandmaster's own Padawan his own apprentice when Anakin Skywalker runs his course before running out of use. Palpatine could only wonder the amount of power someone as powerful as Master Yoda could wield, if he taught his student about the dark side of the Force. Izuku sat inside of the truck heading towards the prison of Tartarus. He had been thinking about his past up until now as he thought about the reason why the heroes had arrested him for killing the person who was All Might's nemesis. He had gotten All Might's permission to end the villain's life before he could do anything else to everyone. So why was he arrested? All because they feared that he would turn the blade he had back on them. Letting out a sigh of resignation, he waited for the truck to eventually arrive at the prison to serve out his remaining sentence. Shaking his head, he stood up from the backseat of the vehicle and used the Force to stop the truck and escape his bindings. The policemen inside of the front of the truck were deeply confused as they tried to push their gas pedal. It wasn't working, but by the time they were taking notice that he wasn't bound by chains, they were already too late for Izuku got out of the truck on his own. Standing on the freeway within Japan, Izuku took in a deep breath as he walked away from the truck, releasing his hold on the Force surrounding it. And once that happened, the truck sped down the street without any reason to stop as the police in the vehicle tried to turn around. Izuku was walking a few paces away from the area he got off the truck at and looked over the edge of the freeway. He smiled to himself as he pulled himself over the edge of it and jumped down to the ground far below. The police who were escorting him to the prison ran over to the edge of the freeway and looked down as they called for backup. Code Red. We have an escaped convict. I repeat, we have an escaped convict. The policeman called on the radio. Which direction did the suspect run off to? The person on the other side of the radio called back. He jumped off the damn freeway, he said, before rushing back to his car. How high was the jump? The operator asked, as the policeman spoke back with a haunted tone. It was around 200 feet in the air, before he turned the vehicle around to get off the freeway. Now on the streets, Izuku looked at multiple maps of Japan and found that he was just close to the prison of Tartarus. He let out a sigh of relief as he walked down the streets using the Force to make people forget he was even there. Even allowing him to get away with small theft in the shape of a change of clothes so that he could blend in with the civilians. He was currently taking a right turn at a corner street as he came face to face with a hero who was on the lookout for an escaped convict. He stared at Izuku for a moment before speaking to him with a tone of uncertainty. Hey, you, the one with the blue jacket. The hero called out. What is it, sir? Izuku asked, confused. Do you know where the escaped convict Midoriya Izuku went? He called out as Izuku looked at an imaginary watch. I think he went south of here. I really need to head to work though, sir. Izuku replied as the hero rushed off in that direction. Thanks for the information. he called out, rushing down south. Huh, I didn't even have to use my powers over the Force. Interesting, Izuku mumbled to himself as he continued to walk about his day. 2. He continued to walk through the streets as he came across multiple other heroes and heroines who were all searching for him. He pointed them all in the same direction as the first hero he had talked about, his last known location. He was pretty sure that one of them would be able to see through his facade of being on his way to work soon enough. But he knew that if he could keep this up, he might be able to find a place to sleep tonight without being caught by the heroes. He was already a long way from home, said home being Ua Academy. And he wanted to return back to the school so that he could be reunited with his classmates. He didn't know if they were going to be afraid of his power though. Alright, just need to find a spot to sleep for the night. Then I will head over to UA in the morning. It's in Tokyo, and from what it looks like, I am near Hiroshima. It will take me at least a day's travel by foot in order to reach Tokyo itself. At least another 4 hours to make it to UA itself during the interim. Izuku thought to himself as he crossed an alleyway. He was crossing the paths of an alleyway when he felt something, or rather someone crash into his left leg. He looked down and found a small girl with light white hair that was ratty and seemed to be a silver color. But as soon as he knelt to be eye level with her, he noticed how scared she immediately was before she asked him a singular question. Please don't let him get me," she exclaimed, holding onto his shirt. "Don't worry, little one, I won't allow any harm to come to you." Izuku muttered as he hid the girl in his shirt and masking her presence. "Damn it, Eri, where are you?" a voice called out from the said alley. "Sir, are you looking for someone?" Izuku asked, as the man looked at him. "Do you know where my daughter went?" the man asked, as Izuku looked into his eyes. The man was lying about the girl being his daughter. "Yeah, she went down the street that way. I believe that she was heading in the direction of the police department. I don't know which turns she took after she ran past me though," Izuku said, as the man nodded. "At least someone is giving me directions. Your life has been spared," the man said, as Izuku continued to walk away. Holding the trembling form within his jacket, Izuku moved his hand over her head in a soothing gesture. He felt as her trembling slowly stopped before she was sleeping soundly in his arms, to which he placed her in a position to be cradled in his arms. Walking further down the street, Izuku found himself meeting up with another hero as they were walking in a patrol route. The young man immediately took notice of the fact that he was hiding something inside his jacket and became alarmed. "Who are you, and what are you hiding in your jacket?" the young man asked. "Nothing, but you might want to bring her to someone who can keep her safe," Izuku said, pulling out the little girl. "What's her name?" the young man said, instantly changing his attitude. "Her name is Eri. I'm pretty sure that a man with a bird mask and a feathered jacket was searching for her however," Izuku said, as the young man immediately became pale. "What's wrong?" Izuku asked, as the young man looked at him with a hardened expression. "Sir, kid, I need you to come with me. You just ran into the man whom my mentor was investigating," the young man said, as Izuku followed after him wordlessly. As Izuku fell into step with the young man, the two eventually talked about why Izuku was not in school. And with that led to the conversation of which Izuku was telling the young man that he was running from the police because they are trying to arrest him for killing the Kamino Ward villain. The young man immediately grew pale once more as he looked back at Izuku with some slight trepidation as he spoke again. "Why, you're not going to kill another person, right?" he asked, as Izuku sighed. "There is a line I don't cross typically. But if the villain is showing signs that he will not change his ways, it is better to make sure that they cannot continue their life of crime," Izuku said, as the young man let out a sad chuckle. "Wow, I never knew that someone your age could sound so old," the young man quipped. "That's what war'll do to you," Izuku said, before closing his mouth immediately. I'm sorry but, what?" he called out, causing some civilians to look at them funny. "Quiet down. We can't allow for the civilians to be disturbed," Izuku whisper shouted. Sorry, but I mean, shit. How were you involved with a war? That sounds ludicrous. ? The young man exclaimed. "I know, but Nezu's releasing a press conference about my past. It's something I've delved him into in terms of how I became a Jedi." Izuku said, looking away. Hey, I don't judge people, if you have a reason to kill. I may not like it, but that doesn't mean that I won't support your reasons. The young man said, as Izuku looked at him. So what do you think your mentor is going to do when he sees, well, me? Izuku asked, as the young man slapped his face. Shit, you will have to leave, won't you? He asked, as Izuku nodded. Well, take this, it will get you across the city as well as back into Tokyo. The young man said, as Izuku looked at it. It was a small train ticket to Tokyo, and Izuku felt like he could hug this young man. He looked at the slumbering Eri as he placed a hand through her hair as she slowly woke up from her impromptu nap. She immediately noticed how she was not in the arms of her savior and immediately felt like she was about to be attacked when she felt a hand sift through her hair. Looking over, she found Izuku smiling sadly at her as she reached out for him. Picking her up through the force, he pulled her over to himself as she hugged him tightly, perhaps a bit too tightly as he felt her iron grip not letting go. Arriving at the Hero Agency, Izuku stood in front of the young man as well as the building with Eri in his arms. He looked down at the girl as she stared at it with a very cautious expression on her face. She then looked to him as she was very worried that she might just be abandoned by her hero just so that he didn't need to deal with her curse. Why, you're not going to abandon me, are you? Eri asked, as Izuku felt his heartstrings tug at her expression. Don't worry, Eri-chan, I won't be gone for very long. This young man will bring you to his mentor, and they will probably call up Eraserhead. He is someone who can help you with your quirk and make sure that you can control it, since I don't know what it is called. Izuku said, as the girl stared at him in confusion. Who is Eraserhead? She asked, confused. He is an underground hero who can make the quirks of those disappear so long as he stares at them. He will be the one who can raise you to become the best person you can be. Izuku said, as he knelt to her level. What about you? Where are you going? Eri asked, as Izuku smirked. I won't be out of your life for very long, you will see me again very soon. Maybe not tomorrow, or the day after that, but soon. Izuku said, as he pulled out an apple from his pocket. She stared at the offending fruit with some slight fear before she snatched it out of his hand and stared at it in her hands. Looking back up to where Izuku should be, only revealed nothing there as the young man next to her was looking in all directions. The two entered the building as they went to inform the young man's mentor about what in the world happened whilst on his patrol. Off in the distance, Izuku was shown rushing above the building's rooftops as he made his way to the train. As he got on the train, he waited until it was moving before he decided to take a small nap. It was only a few hours later when he soon arrived at Tokyo, before the train was attacked by a villain. Rushing to the front of the train, he saw that the conductor was killed in the attack and manned the train. He really had no clue how to man a train since there were only two levers that controlled the speed and brakes, but surely it couldn't be any worse than a starfighter, right? As it would turn out, manning the conductor's position on the train was very difficult as Izuku crashed the train into the ground, keeping all the civilians safe in the process. As he struggled to get out of the front of the train, he fell to the ground as he accidentally broke through the ceiling of a small shop and landed on the ground. What's your name, dearie? An old woman asked, as Izuku spoke up. The name's Midoriya Izuku, and I have to say grunts another happy landing. Izuku said, as the old woman chuckled. Isn't that the truth? She said, before handing him a piece of candy. Sorry for breaking your ceiling. I will fix it, Izuku said, as he used the force to fix the entire thing. Oh dear, thank you for your assistance. What happened out there to cause you to fall through my roof though? She asked, as Izuku smiled. Just another crash landing that I've seen. Although, I believe manning a train is harder than it is to man a rocket. Izuku said, with a slight chuckle. Well, far be it from me to hold you here, dearie, just head out. I won't tell anyone you were here. The old woman said, as Izuku left the room. Whilst he was gone, an older man entered the room, and he was wearing a Marvel t-shirt as he called out to his wife. Persephone, what in the hell happened here? He said, looking at her. Don't worry, Stan, everything will be alright. Just the neighbor causing a ruckus again. Persephone said, as Stan chuckled. I swear that woman and her dogs are always causing problems. I tell you, Stan said, as he walked down the hallway back to the surveillance room. Izuku stood not too far away from the small shop as he let out a sigh of relief. The woman inside the store hadn't informed her husband about why he was there in the first place. And leaving the store now allowed him to begin his vigilante work just to gain the attention of the heroes. After the day he stopped a crashing train with his power alone, he had garnered enough attention that the heroes were already searching for him. He had changed his attire to become that of a mystical being as he wore dark green and black robes. He had a yellow scarf was hanging over his neck and went lower to his lower torso as he rushed through the night. Jumping from rooftop to rooftop was easy for him, utilizing the force in order to make each jump quite easily. Landing on one more rooftop, Izuku took a seat on the rooftop's edge as he took a drink of water as he needed some rest. Whilst he was sitting to rest, he was approached by someone who came at him from behind as Izuku stood up instantly. Turning around he came face to face to the leader of the League of Villains, the young man staring at him with glee. Izuku glared into the young villain's eyes as he entered a combat stance, pulling his lightsaber from his hip and igniting it. "What brings you here, Shigaraki?" Izuku questioned, as he glared at his opponent. "Your quirk is really useful, you know. My sensei wants it for himself, so you are going to come with me, and I will make sure that you can be freed from your sentence," Shigaraki said, with an extended hand. "I'm sorry, but I won't be joining you. I would rather die before handing over my power to someone who couldn't be able to utilize it," Izuku said, as he launched at the villain. Shigaraki jumped away and into a portal that appeared behind himself as he let out one last screech of anger. "Don't worry, brat, Sensei will find you again, and he will take that power for himself," Shigaraki screamed out as the portal dissipated. Izuku glared at the area where Shigaraki had disappeared. He growled to himself softly before sitting down and entering battle meditation. Letting his heart and adrenaline simmer down to a small pulse throughout his body as his entire body and mind managed to find inner peace. As he continued to let the force flow through his body, someone new came up to greet him on the rooftop. Izuku let the force slowly flow around the new arrival, before noticing their intentions were not evil or malicious in nature. And keeping himself in his battle meditation, which had devolved into full-blown meditation, he spoke out to the new person who had arrived. "Any reason why you want to come to me, sir?" Izuku questioned. "Who are you, and why did you not wish to join the League of Villains?" The person asked. "I do not wish to become a villain to cause chaos and destruction. That young man doesn't even have a worthy goal besides the destruction of the world and hero society. He has no plans of what to do after he manages to take down society," Izuku retorted as the new arrival sat down next to him. "So what are your plans for when you get back into UA?" "Just continue on like normal," the person asked. "Pretty much. I may not have a plan for what I will be doing once I get back to UA. But that doesn't mean that my goals are not worthy of being fought for," Izuku replied. "What's your name, kid?" the man asked, his voice gravelly and scratchy at best. "I plan on becoming a Jedi hero, one who will protect any and all who need it. I will train those who wish to become heroes and bring them on the path of the Jedi, who protect those who truly need it," Izuku said, still in his meditation. "Then your conviction will truly show your intentions," the man said, as Izuku stayed still. Feeling the force around the man, Izuku knew from the words that this was the hero killer Stain. The man had found him meditating after his encounter with Shigaraki Tamura, someone that he'd talked to in the past. Deciding to take up the same stance as the boy, Stain thrusted his blade towards his neck to see if he'll flinch. But the boy did no such thing. He just sat there breathing softly into the wind as Stain smiled to himself. The boy's conviction was powerful, so powerful that he didn't even flinch in the sight of death itself. "Your conviction shows through your actions. I will watch from afar. Although I do have to ask, why are you sitting like that?" Stain questioned. "This is battle meditation. My master showed it to me when I was younger. It allows one to heal their injuries from battle and gives the user their stamina to continue a fight. Although right now I am just meditating," Izuku said, as Stain watched him further. "Can it really heal your injuries?" Stain asked. "Only if you know how to utilize the force. It is an ability gifted to those who hold midichlorians in their body that allows them to use abilities similar to that of a quirk, such as telekinesis, telepathy, and mind control," Izuku said, as he continued to meditate. I see, how does one learn to use this force? Stain asked. Anyone can use the force, so long as they have the midichlorians to do so. But those with quirks already have a bit of the force transmitted into their quirks itself, so you can't use it unless you're quirkless on the earth. I mean, born quirkless. Izuku informed, before correcting his last statement. Ah, so that means your abilities were all just something you trained to attain through trial and error? Stain questioned, Izuku nodding in return. Then that means that you are a true hero through and through. I will meet you again. What was your hero name, brat? Stain questioned. I originally was going to name myself the Jedi Hero Force, but I feel as though that would be too on the nose about my power. I guess you could call me Revenant, Izuku said, as Stain smirked. A truly worthy name for someone who has been arrested for a crime he committed in self-defense. Stain said, disappearing into the night. A few hours later, Izuku was shown walking on the street under the guise of someone else. His hair and eyes were of different colors as he walked amongst the people on the street. He looked at his surroundings as he watched heroes run about searching for him. It had been a day since he escaped from his transport and was slowly making his way over to Ua in order to keep himself safe from everyone outside of their gates. The young man was moving throughout the city before he found himself standing in front of a young man who wore a yellow and white costume with a red visor over his eyes. The young man took a glance at him before noticing the resemblance he'd had with another person who was wanted in Japan. Walking over to grab him, he watched as the young man looked into his eyes with a tilt of his head. From the young hero's point of view, the boy's deep ocean blue eyes were glaring at him with a passion that he couldn't know caused him to freeze on the spot. But before the young hero could even try and chase after him, the young man was gone from his spot on the street. He called up his mentor on the communications device in his ear, telling him that he'd found someone nearly matching the description the Tartarus policeman had given them. And as he chased after the young man's last known whereabouts, we find Izuku stepping out of a nearby alleyway. Letting out a sigh of relief, he continued his journey all the way to where he was just outside of the gates of Ua High. Raising his hand to the doors of the school, he found that they opened up immediately, and walking through, the alarms of the school blared to life. You are really making me worry about you more and more. A familiar voice called out. I know, but I really wanted to come here on my own terms. Aizawa-sensei, Izuku said, looking at the man who now stood behind him. Breaking out of a moving vehicle, and trekking at least 200 kilometers within the span of a few hours. Not to mention evading police and heroes to get here, you really are a piece of work. Midoriya, Aizawa said, before wrapping the boy up in his capture scarf. I know, but at least you got to know the heroes and students who were not really having a good time, right? Izuku asked, as the man smirked. Nothing makes me happier than seeing my colleagues fail at catching someone that is very easy to catch. Aizawa said, as Izuku nodded. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Drop green hearts in the comments so I can know who watches the video till the end, and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Now we will see you in the next video.